The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube. All on our Patreon. Silence. 3 full seconds of it. The kind of silence that has weight. Then, the breathing starts. Mechanical, rhythmic, the sound of a man kept alive by a machine that hates him. Steady and merciless and eternal. The sound that has defined every waking moment of his existence for 23 years. In and out. In and out. The sound of Darth Vader breathing in the dark. Then a voice. Young. Desperate. Raw in the way that only genuine love sounds raw. Father, I won't leave you. Then the Emperor's scream. Not a scream of rage, but of something worse. The scream of absolute power meeting the one thing it could not account for. A long receding wail. Falling. Falling. Swallowed by the dark. Then the breathing again, but wrong now. Stuttering. The machine struggling. A man dying inside a machine that cannot die with him, the two of them disagreeing about it one final time. The mechanical rhythm breaks apart, slows. One long, rattling human exhale. Then water, quiet, persistent. The sound of a lake at night, water meeting stone, retreating, meeting it again. Patient in the way that only ancient things are patient. The sound of something alive and unhurried and utterly indifferent to everything that just happened. Then a single breath, human, desperate, real. He doesn't gasp prettily. The body of Anakin Skywalker, 19 years old, lying in a bed in a white stone villa on Naboo, having been asleep for 6 hours, convulses, sits bolt upright. Both hands seize the bed sheets and pull them toward his chest with the grip of a man grabbing a ledge over a drop. Knuckles white. The whole upper body rigid with a terror that has no object in this room, in this world, in this year. He stays like that, locked, breathing in ragged pulls that slowly over the course of perhaps 30 seconds begin to find their way toward a rhythm. Then he looks down at his hands, he turns them over, slowly, the way you handle something you don't trust. Both flesh, both real, 5 fingers each, with the slight calluses of a pilot, and the small scar across the left knuckle from a training spar 4 years ago that Obi-Wan had dressed without comment. He presses one set of fingers into the other and feels warmth, pulse, the specific aliveness of his own skin. He stays with that for a long time. He breathes, not mechanically, the word is too clean for what this is. He learns his lungs again, feels them expand without permission from any machine, without the pressure cycling of a respirator, without the constant low-level electrical burn along his sternum where the suit's interface met the ruin of his chest. Air comes in. Air goes out. His body does this on its own. It has always done this, he had forgotten. He does not say anything. There is nothing to say. There is only the breathing in the water outside, and the cold fact of his own 2 hands. Then the memories come. Not cleanly, not in sequence. They arrive the way debris arrives after an explosion. In pieces, at speed, from every direction at once. The Death Star. Both of them. The first one swallowing Alderaan whole. He had watched the readouts, not the viewport. A choice he told himself was tactical and knew was cowardice. The second one falling apart around him while he carried his son's weight toward a shuttle with a body that was already failing. One step at a time. The suit losing pressure. The breathing apparatus throwing error signals he ignored. Padmé, her face. The medical table on Polis Massa, the pale, terrible stillness of her, and the medical droid saying she has lost the will to live, in a tone of clinical confusion, as if the will to live were a simple thing, easily maintained. Not the exact thing he had crushed out of her with his own hands on a black rock shore while fire fell from the sky. Her eyes. The way they looked at him in those last moments, not with accusation, because she was beyond accusation, but with a grief so profound it had gone past expression into something quieter and more devastating than anything she had ever said to him. Luke, his son, his boy who never knew him as anything other than a monster, and who stood on the second Death Star and held out his hand anyway. Who said father when no one had called him that in 20 years, and meant it? Who chose to believe in something that had given him no evidence to believe in? Luke's hand severed at the wrist. That is on him, that specific horror is on him. Vader's blade doing Vader's work while Palpatine watched with his yellow eyes and his quiet satisfaction. And then Luke afterward, still choosing. Still reaching. There is still good in you. I can feel it. Obi-Wan. On the high ground, the moment that made everything else possible, all the horror that followed, beginning with a young man's arrogance and an old man's grief and a planet of fire that should have killed them both and only half succeeded. Obi-Wan's face as he stood there, what it cost him to walk away, what it cost him to leave the Jedi Temple. The children, he does not let himself linger on that. Some things you carry in a locked room inside yourself and you do not open the door. He breathes through all of it, holds himself in the present tense. This room, this bed, this lake outside this window, this body, with the absolute focus of a man who knows that if he lets the memories pull him under, he will drown in them before he accomplishes a single thing. Then, one image cuts through all the rest. Not a horror, something clean and devastating in a completely different direction. His mother, laughing, standing in a kitchen he has never seen, underground, warm, smelling of dried grain and machine oil, with her hands around a cup and her face turned slightly toward a window that lets in a bar of desert light, and laughing at something someone has said, her whole face open with it. Easy, the laugh of a woman who has been given time and safety enough to remember how. Shmi in the Lars homestead, in a life he never let her have. The thought arrives not as a thought but as a physical event, a blow to the sternum, a pressure behind the eyes. She is alive. She has not been taken yet. She is alive, right now, tonight, in that kitchen or in that bed, whole and safe and alive. And there are days left to keep her that way. He stands. The movement is wrong for a 19-year-old. Everything about the way he carries himself is wrong for a 19-year-old. The posture, the economy of motion, the complete absence of the fidgeting restlessness that has defined him since he was old enough to walk. He moves like a man who has set something very heavy down after carrying it for a very long time, and whose body is still adjusting to the absence of the weight. He pulls his Padawan braid over his shoulder and looks at it for a moment, the small, tight plate that marks him as apprenticed, as incomplete, as someone else's student. He lets it fall. He does not cut it. Cutting it would be a statement. He is done making statements. He simply stops identifying with it the way you stop identifying with a name that no longer fits. He goes to the window. Lake Veracino lies below him in the dark, glacier-fed and enormous, the kind of blue-gray at night that is almost indistinguishable from the sky above it. The water moves against the stone foundations of the villa in long, unhurried repetitions. The fireflies, not insects exactly, but something native to Naboo that produces light the way fireflies do, in slow, patient pulses, drift above the water's surface in clusters. The air comes in through the open archway, cool and alive, carrying the smell of the flowering vines and the mineral cold of the lake, and nothing mechanical whatsoever. He stands at the window for 10 seconds, the longest 10 seconds of his second life. He memorizes it, the way a soldier memorizes the face of something he has to believe he will return to. Then he turns away from it with purpose. He knocks on her door quietly. 2 knocks, enough to wake without alarming. She answers in a robe, her hair loose, sleep still on her face, and then her face clears as she reads his. The confusion is immediate and thorough. This is not the Anakin she fell asleep thinking about, not the boy who looked at her across the dinner table with the transparent aching want of someone who has never learned to hide anything. The person standing in her doorway has the same face and different eyes, older eyes that have seen something she has not, something comprehensive and permanent. Another nightmare? She asks. Yes, he says. His voice is quiet in a way that is more unsettling than any volume. But it's over now. A beat, she waits. I need to tell you 3 things. I need you to listen without stopping me, because there is very little time. She steps back from the door. She sits on the edge of her bed, her diplomat's composure assembling itself around her despite the hour. She nods. He does not sit. He stands in the doorway, his hands loose at his sides, and he tells her. Chancellor Palpatine is a Sith Lord. His Sith name is Darth Sidious. He has been manipulating the Republic from inside it for over a decade. He is the author of this crisis, all of it. The separatists, the assassination attempts on you, the war that is coming. It is his design. She opens her mouth. Second, he says. Not unkind. Simply continuing. I am going to Tatooine tonight. My mother is alive, and she will be in danger within days. I am going to stop that. Padmé closes her mouth. Third, He meets her eyes directly, with the full weight of his attention, and she has the sudden disorienting sense of being seen by someone who knows her in some way she cannot account for. When I come back, I am going to need your help to end something that should never have started. I will need you to trust me. Not the Jedi, not the Council. Me. The silence between them holds every question she has, and she has 20, she has 100. She has the trained and rigorous mind of a woman who has governed since she was 14, and she needs evidence, precedent, corroboration. She needs the argument laid out in a form she can test. He looks at her, really looks at her, the way a man looks at someone he thought he had lost, like the looking itself is something he is not taking for granted. Please, he says, trust me. She doesn't know why it works. She will think about it later. Why this version of him, this changed and frightening and somehow more honest version, earns in a single moment what the boy had been trying to earn for days. She doesn't know. She only knows that she does. She trusts him, whatever that costs her. Go, she says quietly. Bring her back. He nods once. Precise. The nod of someone who has received a tactical confirmation. R2-D2 is in a charging alcove in the corridor outside, a low amber light pulsing at his dome in the dark. Anakin crouches in front of him, the intimacy of the gesture striking against everything else about him, this man with old eyes getting down to the level of a small droid in a dark hallway. R2 blips awake, runs a brief scan, makes a questioning sound, readings elevated, stress indicators all wrong for a sleeping household at 3 a.m. It's really me, old friend, Anakin says. His voice drops to something meant only for the two of them, something that has no performance in it whatsoever. I know you don't understand that yet, wondering, but I'm home. He moves through the sleeping villa, gathering only what he needs, his lightsaber, his utility belt, a water flask from the kitchen, filled without turning on the light. He does not take anything that is not functional. He has lived for 23 years with only what the suit required. The habit of minimalism is bone deep. At the villa's outer door, he stops. He looks back once. The archways, the vines. The lake is visible through the open walls, moonlight lying across it in a long, pale bar, the water moving underneath it with that same patient, unhurried persistence. The fireflies are drifting, the smell of the flowers. He memorizes it again. Then he walks out into the Naboo night, with the cold, exact urgency of a man who has already died once and intends not to waste a single thing he has been given. Tatooine announces itself before the ship breaks atmosphere. There is a moment, descending through the upper cloud layer where the planet is still abstract, a tan and ochre disk against the black, unremarkable, the kind of world cartographers mark with a single word and move on from. Then the ship drops below the cloud ceiling, and the twin suns hit the viewport simultaneously, and the desert opens up below like a wound in the ground, vast and pale and merciless, and it is not abstract anymore. It never was. It just requires proximity to remind you of that. Anakin sits in the pilot's seat and does not move for a moment after the autopilot disengages. He has not been here, not as this version of himself. The man who came back to this planet in the original shape of his life came in grief and desperation, arriving too late for everything, finding only what was left after the worst had already happened. That man never stood at the top of a ship's ramp and breathed Tatooine air with his mother still alive somewhere below him. He engages the landing sequence, finds a flat shelf of rock 2 kilometers outside the Anchorhead settlement perimeter, well away from the vaporator fields, well away from any worked ground. He sets the ship down without drama, and sits for another moment in the sudden quiet after the engines die. Then he opens the hatch. The heat arrives first, not gradually, not as a transition, but as an immediate total fact. The air on Tatooine does not ease you in. It replaces whatever you were breathing with something older and heavier, saturated with minerals and baked rock, and the particular dryness that pulls moisture from the back of the throat on the first inhale. The smell is dust and sun-warmed stone, and something faintly electrical from the atmospheric ions that build up in the low humidity air between weather systems. He stands at the top of the ramp and breathes it. 23 years of recycled oxygen, filtered, processed, mechanically delivered at controlled pressure and temperature, air that came to him through tubes and valves and had never once touched open sky before it reached his ruined lungs. He stands in the hatch of a stolen Naboo transport on a rock shelf above the Tatooine desert, and breathes air that has blown across 1,000 kilometers of open sand and touched nothing man-made. And for a moment, the simple animal fact of that is the only thing in the galaxy. 5 full seconds. Then he walks down the ramp. He needs the walk. He knows he needs it. The Lars homestead is 2.3 kilometers from where he landed. He knows the distance, the way he knows the position of every switch in a T-65 cockpit, from a memory that belongs to a life he didn't live in this body but carries completely. He could cover it faster. He doesn't. He lets the desert set the pace. The ground underfoot is not uniform. People who have never been to Tatooine imagine sand, clean, cinematic, endlessly photogenic. The reality is harder. The rock shelves that break the surface are sharp-edged and require attention. The sand between them shifts underfoot with a dry whisper. The moisture evaporators on the outer perimeter of the settled region make a low mechanical cycling sound that carries further than it should in the thin air. Twice he adjusts his path around clusters of rock formations that cast long shadows in the angle of the morning suns. Not because he can't navigate them, but because he is in no hurry and the shadows are cooler. He is composing himself, organizing the weight of what is about to happen into something he can carry through a door and set down at a kitchen table without breaking anything. What is about to happen is going to be the hardest thing he has ever done. He has fought wars. He has killed people whose names he learned afterward, and people whose names he never learned and never sought. He has walked through rooms that were silenced by his presence alone, entire rooms of experienced and dangerous people, going quiet at the sound of mechanical breathing and measured footsteps. He has negotiated with the Emperor of the Galaxy, which is not negotiation in any traditional sense, but is its own category of psychological endurance. He has died. None of that is preparation for this. The homestead dome appears on the horizon at perhaps 300 meters, a low curve of sun-bleached material rising barely above the desert floor, semi-subterranean, built to hide from the heat rather than rise above it. A practical shape, a shape that says the people who built it understood the planet they were living on and made peace with its terms. Anakin stops walking. He stands in the desert and looks at it. The dome, the hatch, the vaporators ringing the outer perimeter in their slow mechanical cycles. He looks at the entry hatch and knows, with a certainty that has nothing to do with the Force and everything to do with simple arithmetic, that she is below it, in that kitchen, in that home, alive and ordinary and going about a morning that she does not know he is coming to interrupt. The narration in his head, the one that has been running since he woke up in Varakino, goes quiet. There is only the desert, the hatch, the distance between. He walks the rest of the way. He knocks 3 times. Not tentatively. The sound of boots on metal stairs comes from below, heavy, unhurried, the walk of a man who has answered the hatch 1,000 times and is not alarmed by it. The hatch opens from the inside. Cliegg Lars stands backlit by the courtyard below, squinting up at a stranger with the particular expression of a man who has lived long enough on the outer rim to be polite and cautious simultaneously. He's holding a hydro-spanner. He was mid-repair on something. The calluses on his hands are the kind that take decades to build. He looks at Anakin. Really looks. The assessing scan of someone who has learned to read people from necessity rather than education, and what he finds there makes him go still. Not afraid, careful, the way you are careful around something whose weight you haven't yet estimated. Help you? He says. I'm Anakin Skywalker, Anakin says. I'm Shmi's son. I've come to see her. Cliegg's face moves through several things in quick succession. Surprise, genuine, unguarded, then assessment, recalibrating everything he thought he knew about this morning. Then something softer, almost involuntary, the expression of a man who has heard his wife say a name in certain tones and is now looking at the person behind it. He turns his head and calls down into the house. The name carries. They wait. The desert wind moves. The vaporators cycle. Then footsteps on the stairs. Different ones. Lighter. She comes up into the Tatooine light and stops. She is 43 years old and whole. That is the fact his body registers first. Before the face, before the details. She is whole. She is upright. She is moving under her own power. There is no injury in her. There is no damage in her that he put there by arriving too late. She is 43 years old, and the morning suits her, and she is alive in the most complete and ordinary sense of the word. Then she sees him. He has changed. He can see her seeing it. The The moment where she looks for the boy she last had news of, and finds instead this, and has to recalibrate. He is not taller, but he carries himself as if he is. His face is composed in a way that no 19-year-old's face is composed without something having happened to it. He is looking at her with an expression she has never seen on a human face. Not in 43 years of a life that has not spared her much. Not quite grief, not quite joy, not quite love, but some compound of all four that the language hasn't made a word for yet. She doesn't speak, neither does he. He covers the distance in 3 steps and puts his arms around her. He doesn't say anything, he doesn't have anything ready that would survive contact with the actual moment, so he says nothing. He holds her the way you hold something you thought was gone. With his whole body, his face pressed into her hair, both arms around her shoulders with a grip that is controlled and desperate simultaneously. Her hair smells of dried herbs and desert dust, and something warm and specific that belongs only to her. He has not smelled it in over 20 years. He didn't know he still remembered it. She holds him back. Her arms come up around him without hesitation. She's bewildered. She must be this person holding her as her son, and also somehow isn't. Something has happened to him that has no name in anything she knows, but underneath the bewilderment, she is certain. The certainty of mothers, specific and unlearned. Something terrible almost took her boy. He is here because he would not let it. He pulls back. Not far, just enough to look at her. She sees his face. The tears are not the shaking, breaking kind. Not the grief of a boy who has never learned to hold himself together. They are the deep, silent, unavoidable tears of a man who has held an enormous thing in for longer than the human frame is built to sustain, and the frame has simply decided it is done. He wipes his face with the back of his wrist, a movement that is completely soldierly and completely at odds with what is happening on his face. "I'm sorry," he says. Quiet. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." She touches his face with both hands, cups it. Looks at him the way she looked at him when he was 9 years old, and the Jedi had come and the world was about to change irrevocably. "You're here now," she says. Owen appears at the hatch. He is 21 years old, and he is already, undeniably, the person he will be for the rest of his life, closed where others are open, literal where others read between lines, protective in a way that reads as suspicion, until you understand it is the same thing wearing different clothes. He looks at Anakin with the polite wariness of someone whose read on strangers is sharp, and who is not yet sure what this particular stranger is. "You must be Anakin," he says. The tone is calibrated precisely at the border of welcoming and watchful. "I am," Anakin says. Beru appears beside Owen a moment later. She is 20, and where Owen guards his perceptions, she simply uses them. She looks at Anakin the way she might look at an unusual formation of rock in a familiar landscape, with quiet interest, with the patience of someone who knows the desert rewards waiting. Her eyes go to his hands. Both of them. Flesh. She notices. He can see her notice. The way he touches his left hand briefly with his right. A gesture he hasn't consciously made, checking for something that isn't there anymore. She doesn't comment on it. She says, "Have you eaten?" The tone of the question leaves no room for refusal. He accepts. They go below. The kitchen is the warmest room in the homestead. A wood-burning stove made from salvaged alloy. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling on hooks, their smell low and complex in the enclosed space. A table that seats 6 with room to spare, its surface worn smooth in the places where hands rest and rough where tools have been laid down. The smell of the whole room is dust and machine oil and grain, and the specific domestic warmth of a space where people have eaten every meal of their shared life. Anakin sits. He eats what Beru puts in front of him with the focused economy of a soldier at a field mess. Not ungrateful, just efficient. The food is simple and real, and he eats all of it. Kliag asks about the Jedi Order. Anakin answers in the way of someone describing a fact about another person's biography, accurate, detailed, emotionally unattached. Klieg watches him as he answers and revises his estimate upward quietly and says nothing about the revision. Owen asks how long he's staying. Anakin says, long enough to do what needs doing. Owen absorbs this without satisfaction and without objection. Beru says nothing out loud. She watches his hands. When Shmi steps away to clear the breakfast things, Anakin leans forward over the table. His voice drops without becoming threatening. It simply becomes exact. "There is a Tusken raiding party forming in the Jundland Wastes," he says. He looks at Klieg first, then Owen. It is organized. It has a target. It will move within days, possibly tonight. Klieg sets down his cup. You're certain? Yes. How? Because I know what they're planning and why, and I am going to go out into the desert tonight and stop it. He says it without drama. A logistical statement. I need 2 things from this table. I need you to say nothing of this to my mother until it is done, and I need one of you to make sure she does not leave the homestead after dark. Klieg and Owen look at each other. Something passes between them. A long marriage of practicality, the silent negotiation of 2 people who have shared a household long enough to have developed a private language. Owen turns back to Anakin. You're going to stop a Tusken raiding party, he says. Alone. A single person. Yes. Owen starts to lay out the problem with this. The numbers. The weapons. The fact that 30 men with rifles and Klieg's own experience couldn't. Anakin looks at him. Just looks. The look has nothing aggressive in it. It is simply the look of a man who has heard every version of this conversation and has none of them left in him, and who is asking, very quietly, to be taken at his word. Owen stops. The silence holds. Protect my mother, Anakin says. Don't let her out of the homestead tonight. That's what I need from you. Then, all right. Before he goes to sleep, he needs a few hours, and he takes them without apology, the sleep of a soldier rationing recovery. Shmi finds a moment alone with him in the corridor, outside the guest room. She is not Padmé, who trusts strategically, weighing evidence. She is not Klieg, who trusts practically, watching for the thing that proves it. She simply stands in front of her son and looks at him with the specific attention of a woman who has known him longer than anyone, and she asks, very quietly, Annie, what happened to you? He is still for a moment. The corridor is narrow and dim, the desert heat pressing even this far below ground, the only sound the distant cycling of the vaporators above them. I went a very long way away, he says, and I did terrible things, and I found my way back. She does not push. She does not require the shape of the terrible things or the map of the long way away. She reaches up and takes his face in both her hands, the same gesture as outside, the same instinctive framing of him, as if to be certain he is real and present, and not a thing she is imagining in the heat. She looks at him the way she looked at him when he was 9 years old and about to leave Tatooine for the last time, when the galaxy was about to take him from her, and she had to let it because that was what love required. Then you're home, she says. Whatever the rest of it means, you're home. His jaw tightens, the small, controlled movement of a man keeping himself together by the precise application of will. He nods once. She pulls him forward and presses her lips to his forehead, and he stands in a corridor on Tatooine, 19 years old and 45 years old, simultaneously, and lets his mother hold him the way she did when he was small, and the nights were cold, and the future was something that hadn't happened yet. He wakes at the 3rd hour past sunset. No alarm, no mechanical prompt. His body simply surfaces from sleep at the exact moment he told it to, the way it learned to during the war years, when rest was a resource to be allocated rather than a thing that happened to you. He lies still for 3 seconds in the dark of the Lars guest room. Low ceiling, rough walls, the smell of machine oil and dried grain seeping through from the rest of the house, and confirms the inventory: body, breath, location, time. Then he sits up and reaches for his boots. The homestead is asleep. He moves through it without sound, not performing stealth, simply not making noise, which is a different thing. Stealth is the effortful management of presence. This is the natural quiet of a man who learned to move through a galaxy that wanted him dead, and made his survival contingent on leaving no trace of himself in any given space until he chose to. The kitchen is dark. Someone left a cup on the table, half full of cold tea. Beru, probably she strikes him as someone who works late and forgets to finish things. He doesn't touch it. He passes through and takes the stairs up to the desert in 12 steps, and pushes the hatch open against the night air. Tatooine at the 3rd hour past sunset is a different planet than Tatooine in the twin sun glare of day. The temperature has dropped 40 degrees in the hours since dark. The sky is extraordinary. No light pollution this far from Anchorhead's dim glow, no cloud cover, no atmospheric haze, just the full, unobstructed fact of the galaxy spread across the dome of the sky from horizon to horizon. 2 moons, both partial tonight, throwing pale, overlapping shadows across the sand, that shift almost imperceptibly as the night moves. He stands at the top of the hatch and looks at it for a moment. The sky, the sand, the cold. Then he walks north into the Jundland wastes. He does not need the Force to find them. He finds them the way a tracker finds anything, by reading what the terrain is trying to tell him. Bantha prints in the sand at the wash crossing, fresh enough that the edges haven't crumbled. The smell of the animals, specific and strong, carried on the night wind from the northwest. The faint sound at the edge of hearing of Tusken vocalizations, not words, not in any language he can fully parse, but communication, the sound of a group of people who know each other well moving together toward a shared purpose. He stops on a ridge of dark rock above the wash and looks down. There are 31 of them. He counts them methodically. 31 warriors in full wrappings, their faces entirely covered, moving with the particular fluid efficiency of people who have crossed this terrain 1,000 times in the dark. Their banthas are loaded, not for a journey, for a raid. The loads are light and positioned for fast dismounting. The warriors carry gator-fi sticks and projectile rifles, and the specific tension of people who have committed to something and are past the point of reconsidering it. At their head is the war chief. He is distinguishable not by any marker Anakin can name, but by the way the others orient around him. The small, unconscious adjustments of bodies in proximity to authority. He is large. He moves like someone who has not questioned his own capability in a very long time. Anakin watches them for 30 seconds, counting, mapping positions, calculating the distances. Then he steps off the ridge and walks down into the wash to meet them. The lead warrior sees him first. A single figure stepping out of the shadow of the rock formation into the open wash, walking toward a raiding party of 31 armed warriors, with the unhurried cadence of a man taking an evening walk, no weapon drawn, no aggressive posture, simply present, in the middle of the space they need to move through, looking at them. The column stops, the lead warrior raises a hand, an instinctive halt signal, and the rest of the party compresses behind him. Gator-fi sticks come up. 3 rifle carriers step to the flanks. The banthas shift, picking up the rider's tension through the bond that runs between them like a second nervous system. The war chief moves to the front. He stands 10 meters from Anakin and looks at him across that distance. His eyes, the only visible part of him, are dark and still. He does not make the sound that means intruder. He does not make the sound that means attack. He makes no sound at all, which is itself a form of communication. A man who is trying to understand what he is looking at before he decides what to do with it. Anakin speaks first. He speaks in Tusken. 40 words, roughly. 40 words learned by a guilt-ridden wreck of a man from holorecords he played alone in the dark on Imperial Star Destroyers. A subconscious act of penance for something he could not undo. 40 words dragged back through the soul overright intact, some muscle memory of a broken mind that had held on to them because letting go of them entirely would have meant letting go of the last human thing he had done wrong. The words are not sophisticated. His accent is poor, but they are real Tusken, not approximated, not pidgin, real words in real grammatical order. And no outsider in living memory has spoken them. The effect on the war chief is immediate and total. He goes absolutely still. Behind him, the 30 warriors go still with him. The banthas lower their heads. Anakin waits. He gives the war chief time to process what he has just heard, because processing is not weakness. It is the appropriate response to something genuinely unexpected, and he has learned the hard way that rushing a man past his processing time produces a cornered animal rather than a thinking one. Then he extends his right hand, palm down, and opens it toward the sand. The weapons come up, all 31 of them, gator-fi sticks and rifle barrels, and 2 short blades that had been at belts, rise from the grip of their carriers simultaneously and hang suspended in the air at head height. Not yanked, not ripped away in violence, simply lifted, as if the air itself has decided to hold them for a moment. The motion is so smooth, so complete, so perfectly simultaneous, that the sound it produces is almost nothing, a collective soft whisper of displacement. 31 weapons hanging in the moonlight, 31 warriors standing empty-handed beneath them. The war chief does not run. A war chief does not run, but his body does something that is the precursor to running, a subtle rearrangement of weight, a preparation, and then it stops, because there is nowhere to run to. Because the thing in front of him has just removed the possibility of the world operating the way it has always operated, and a man who can do that is not a man you run from. A man who can do that is a category of thing that running does not apply to. Anakin holds the weapons in the air for 5 full seconds, long enough to be impossible, long enough for every warrior in the column to understand that this is not a trick, long enough for the knowledge to settle through each of them like water through sand, reaching the lowest parts first. Then he opens his left hand. The banthas kneel, not 1, not 2. All 7 of the riding banthas, in one long simultaneous motion, fold their front legs and lower their massive bodies to the desert floor. Their knees hit the sand with a sound like distant muffled thunder. The riders are deposited, ungracefully, in the manner of people who were not consulted about the movement, onto the ground. None of them are hurt. The banthas did not throw them. They simply sat down, and the riders went with them. A bantha kneeling is not a physical event. Not only, a bantha is bonded to its rider in something that runs deeper than training, a soul contract, old as the desert, maintained through years of shared survival. When a bantha kneels, its warrior's identity goes with it. The rider is not unhorsed, the rider is unmade, briefly, in the framework of everything they understand about themselves and their standing in the world. 7 warriors sit in the sand in the shadow of their kneeling banthas and cannot find their footing. The remaining 24 warriors on foot are standing perfectly still. The war chief has not moved. He is looking at Anakin with an expression that his wrappings mostly conceal, but that his stillness makes entirely legible. This is not what a warrior looks like before a fight. This is not what a warrior looks like during a retreat. This is what a warrior looks like at the moment of genuine, complete reckoning. Anakin raises one hand, palm up, and the air changes. It begins as a sound, wind picking up from several directions at once, which does not happen naturally, which the desert air does not do, because desert wind has a direction and obeys it. This wind has no direction. It is convergent. It comes from everywhere toward a single point. And that point is where Anakin is standing. The sand rises with it. Not a curtain, not a wall, a spiral, a contained, living vortex of sand that builds itself around him in widening rings, climbing from the desert floor to a height of 15 meters, orbiting him in visible currents that catch both moonlights and throw them back fragmented and cold. He stands at the absolute center of it. His robes move. The sand touches his robes and is directed away. Nothing else about him moves at all. He stands in the eye of what he has made, perfectly still, perfectly untouched, looking at the war chief through the swirling wall of the desert itself. The sound it makes is the sound of the Wind Lady. The Tuscans know this sound. They have heard it in stories. They have heard it in ceremony. They have passed it down through every generation of every clan as the sound of elemental justice taking form. They have a name for the figure that stands at the center of that sound, untouched and still and looking at you. They are looking at her now. He walks forward through his own sandstorm. The vortex moves with him. He crosses the space between himself and the war chief in 12 steps, and the wall of sand parts slightly as he reaches the chief and reforms behind him, so that when he stops they are inside it together, the two of them, the outsider and the war chief, enclosed in the eye of the thing Anakin has made from the desert. He reaches out. Not physically. He reaches through the Force with the specific gentleness that a thing of enormous power requires when touching something fragile. Not a violation, not a ripping open, but a careful introduction of light into a dark space. He finds the war chief's mind and he opens a door in it. The vision he places there is true. Not a threat. Not a fabricated horror. True. The war chief sees the homestead raided and burned, and he sees what follows. Not victory, not reclamation, not the water spirit land restored to the desert. He sees the settlers that come after. More of them. Angrier, armed with things the Tuscans' rifles cannot answer. He sees fortifications going up on the boundary land, permanent structures, each raid justifying the next encroachment, the desert's edge pushed back one violent episode at a time, the sacred ground lost not to one family, but to the century of escalation that one family's burning begins. He sees it the way Anakin has seen so many futures, clearly, specifically, without sentiment and without mercy. Then the vision shifts. The homestead stands. The vaporators stay where they are, not multiplying, not advancing, the line held at exactly where it is tonight. a single structure at the edge of what belongs to the desert. Not growing, not encroaching, the boundary respected in both directions, not out of generosity, but out of the mutual understanding of what happens if it isn't. Anakin withdraws. He steps back out of the chief's mind and returns entirely to himself and to the cold desert night. He speaks again in Tuscan. More words this time. The 40 he had now extended by the specific ones he needs. Words for boundary, for covenant, for the distinction between the ground that belongs to the sand and the ground that does not. This family stays. The line holds. The desert keeps what is the desert's quest. A pause, the sandstorm orbiting them, both moons high and cold. Go home. The war chief looks at him. He looks for a long time. His eyes, dark and still above the wrappings, move across Anakin's face with the careful attention of someone trying to find the seam in something, the place where the human being is hiding behind whatever this is. He does not find it. There is no seam. The human being and the thing that commands the desert and speaks in the old tongue are not in conflict. They are the same person. The war chief makes a gesture to his warriors. It is complex, formal, multi-part, the Tuscan equivalent of a thing that has been acknowledged, not accepted under duress, not conceded in defeat, but acknowledged, witnessed, recorded in the memory of the people who saw it to be passed forward. He turns his bantha north. The animal rises from its kneel as if it has been waiting for exactly this. The war chief mounts without ceremony and moves. The column follows, the warriors, the other banthas, the whole organized mass of 31 people who came south with a purpose and are now going north with a different understanding of the world. Every suspended weapon drops to the sand as they move, returning to the ground as simply as they rose from it. Anakin watches them go. He stands at the center of where the sandstorm was. It has settled now, the sand returning to the desert floor in a long whisper, the wind gone as if it was never there, and watches until the last bantha moves over the northern ridge and disappears into the dark beyond. Then he exhales, one long controlled breath. He sits down on the nearest rock and puts his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands for a moment. Not grief, not triumph, something without a clean name, the specific weight of a man who has just altered the history of a place he destroyed in another life and is still working out what that means. Above him, both moons are high and cold, and the stars are extraordinary. He sits with the silence for a while. When he comes back in, the kitchen light is on. Shmi is sitting at the table with 2 cups of tea. She looks up when he comes down the stairs, reads his face with a single glance, and pushes 1 cup toward the empty chair across from her. She asks, "Did it go well?" She has lived 43 years on difficult ground, and she understands that some questions are less important than their answers, and that the man sitting across from her is home and whole, and the night is over. He drinks his tea. They sit together in the warm kitchen under the desert stars, saying almost nothing, and the silence between them is not empty. It is the specific full silence of 2 people who have found each other across an enormous distance and have decided without ceremony that this is enough. This is enough. He is on the roof of the homestead at dawn, his hands inside a moisture vaporator coupling that hasn't been properly calibrated in at least 3 seasons. Nobody asked him to do this. He simply woke before everyone else, went up through the hatch into the early gray light before either sun had cleared the horizon, found the vaporator with the irregular cycling sound he'd noticed on arrival, and opened it. The problem is immediately obvious to anyone who grew up watching moisture farmers work. The primary intake valve is misaligned by 4 degrees, the kind of small, persistent error that costs a family 15% of their daily yield without ever announcing itself as a crisis. Just a slow, quiet drain, the kind of problem that patient poverty produces and busy people learn to live around. He corrects it, finds 2 secondary issues while he's in there and corrects those as well, closes the housing and moves to the next unit in the row. He is on the 3rd vaporator when he hears boots on the metal roof behind him. Owen doesn't say anything immediately. He comes and stands beside the open vaporator housing and looks at what Anakin has done to it, with the expression of a man performing an involuntary assessment. He looks at the calibration, at the corrected valve, at the secondary repairs. His jaw moves slightly. He has the face of someone who has just had an opinion adjusted without permission, and hasn't decided how he feels about that yet. He crouches down beside the housing and looks more closely, pulls the intake valve cover, and checks the alignment himself because he is not a man who takes other people's work on faith. The alignment is correct, better than correct. You did the first two as well, Owen says. It is not a question. The second one had a cracked coupling ring, Anakin says. I replaced it with the spare housing from the third unit's secondary line. The third unit doesn't need it. Its secondary intake is sealed from the inside, probably has been for years. You're not losing anything. Owen sits with this for a moment. Then he picks up a spanner and moves to the open housing and begins checking the secondary line himself. Not because he doubts, because he is Owen Lars, and this is how Owen Lars operates. Through his hands, through verification, through the patient accumulation of things he has confirmed personally. They worked side by side on the same unit in complete silence for 20 minutes. The silence is not uncomfortable. It is the specific silence of two people who have nothing easy to say to each other and have found, without discussing it, that the alternative to easy conversation is simply working. The twin suns clear the horizon. The temperature begins its long daily climb. The vaporators cycle in their corrected rhythms around them. At some point, Owen hands Anakin a tool without looking at him. Anakin takes it and uses it and hands it back. It is not friendship. It is not understanding. It is something earlier than both of those. The first small, unannounced revision of a verdict. Shmi finds him at the edge of the vaporator field an hour later. She brings water, because she knows the desert, and she knows her son, and she knows that neither of them have ever been reliable about remembering to drink. She hands him a flask, and he takes it and drinks from it, and hands it back, and they stand together at the edge of the worked ground, where the desert begins its uninterrupted run toward the Junland wastes. In the daylight, the wastes are a different thing than they were last night. Stark, beautiful in the way that indifferent things are beautiful. The rock formations catching the early suns at angles that turn them briefly orange. The sand between them pale and unmarked. The whole landscape sitting in total silence under a sky that is already beginning to bleach toward the white of full day. Anakin looks at it. He does not look at his mother yet. How long have you been carrying this? She asks. He considers the question seriously. He owes her that, the serious consideration, the honest answer rather than the managed one. I had a dream that lasted a lifetime, he says. I made every wrong choice. I lost everyone. A pause. He watches a dust eddy spin itself up from the sand, 40 meters out, and exhaust itself just as quickly. Gone as if it never was. You first. He does not elaborate. The specific architecture of the dream. The war, the temple, the suit, the burning shore, stays where it is. What he has given her is the shape of it. The shape is enough. She is quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that isn't thinking about what to say, but sitting with what has been said. Then you woke up, she says. I woke up. Another pause. Longer. The desert does not rush. Are you all right? He turns to look at her then. 43 years old and whole in the morning light, the flask in both hands, watching him with the specific attention that has always been hers. Not probing, not demanding, simply entirely present, willing to receive whatever he can give. Darth Vader, the Emperor's instrument, the terror of the Outer Rim, the man who killed Jedi Masters by the dozen and answered to no one and nothing except the thing that owned him. He has to look away and take a breath before he answers. I'm getting there, he says. She reaches out and takes his hand. His left hand, flesh, warm, real, the hand he spent 20 years without. She holds it the way she held things when he was a boy, and the world was too large and too cold, and required more of him than a child should be required to give. She doesn't say anything else. She doesn't need to. They stand at the edge of the desert in the early morning heat, and she holds his hand, and that is all. And it is not a small thing. Padmé's ship appears over the northern ridge at mid-morning. He calmed her before dawn, a brief, encrypted transmission coordinates and a single line of instruction. She has arrived in a Naboo transport, stripped of any diplomatic markings, which means she thought it through on the way and made a decision about what kind of arrival this needed to be. He notes that. Files it. The ship sets down outside the homestead perimeter, and the ramp extends, and she comes down it with her traveling case and the particular composed efficiency she carries the way other people carry weapons. As a constant, as a natural extension of herself. She is wearing traveling clothes rather than senatorial robes, her hair simply arranged, her face carrying the focused calm of a woman who has had several hours in hyperspace to organize her thoughts and has done exactly that. She stops when she sees the homestead, stops again when the hatch opens and Shmi appears in it. The two women look at each other across the distance. Shmi watches Padmé's arrival with the calm attention of a woman who knows more than she's been told and has spent the night arranging what she knows into a shape she can work with. She is not suspicious. She is simply paying attention, which is its own kind of assessment, and considerably more thorough. Padmé meets her eyes across the distance and does not look away, does not perform composure. She simply stands at the bottom of the ramp and looks back and lets herself be read. Something passes between them in that moment. Not words, not warmth, yet, that comes later, but a mutual recognition of the terms. They are both here because of the same man. They are both, in their different ways, trying to understand what he has become. They will not be in competition about this. That decision is made in the look and confirmed by the way Shmi steps back from the hatch and calls down into the house for tea. The kitchen table holds all of it. Padmé and Shmi sit across from each other with cups between them and talk, for the better part of an hour, about almost nothing. Naboo's rainy season, which Padmé describes and Shmi listens to with the attention of someone who has lived her entire life on a planet where the word rain is theoretical. Tatooine's moisture farming cycles, which Shmi explains and Padmé absorbs with the genuine curiosity of a politician who understands that knowing how people survive is not separate from knowing how to represent them. Whether Anakin ate enough as a child, which both of them approach from different angles and arrive at the same conclusion about, which produces the morning's first shared moment of something warm enough to call understanding. Beneath every word of the conversation runs the real conversation, which neither of them needs to speak aloud, because both of them are too perceptive to require it stated. Two women in a kitchen on the edge of the desert deciding to be on the same side. Anakin stays out of the kitchen during this. He does not need to be there. Some things work better without him in the room. He is in the courtyard when his comlink activates. R2's signal, the droid is still aboard the Naboo transport, keeping its systems warm and its sensors running. The transmission R2 is relaying is not from R2. It is a recorded message, bad encryption chewing the audio into something rough-edged and compressed, but the voice underneath the compression is unmistakable. Obi-Wan's voice, urgent and measured simultaneously, the specific tone of a man reporting a situation rather than panicking about it, because panic is a resource expenditure he has never been able to justify. Geonosis, separatist stronghold, scale of the operation larger than anything the Republic has accounted for. He is being held by Count Dooku. He expects to be executed, he is transmitting coordinates and advising the Council to act. Anakin plays it once, expressionlessly. He turns it off. He goes inside. Padmé looks at him when he enters the kitchen and reads something in his face. "You knew," she says. "I knew he'd find it. He always does. The Council needs to know." This is exactly the kind of intelligence that the Council will deliberate, Anakin says, not impatiently, simply as a fact requiring acknowledgement. They will weigh the intelligence, call for corroboration, debate jurisdiction, and move when they are satisfied. By the time they are satisfied, Obi-Wan will be in an execution arena and the first engagement of the Clone Wars will have happened, and Palpatine will have the crisis he needs to ask for emergency powers. He looks at her steadily. "I am not going to let that happen." Shmi is quiet in the corner of the kitchen. She is listening. She is not interfering. Padmé sets her cup down. "What are you going to do?" he tells her, briefly and precisely. Not infiltration, not extraction from the shadows. That approach requires everything going wrong first, requires the arena and the casualties in the chaos of a battle already begun. He is going to Geonosis openly. He is going to land, identify himself, and request an audience with Count Dooku directly. Dooku was a Jedi Master. Whatever he became, he was formed in the tradition of the Order, and that tradition includes a framework for direct dialogue that a battle droid army doesn't have. He is going to use that framework to extract Obi-Wan and neutralize the immediate crisis before it becomes the war. Padmé listens to all of this with the focused attention of someone translating it into its political architecture as he speaks. When he finishes, she is quiet for a moment. Then she says, "I'm coming with you." He begins to explain why that isn't. "You need a senator standing next to you," she says. Her voice is not raised. It is simply final. Dooku left the Order. He did not leave politics. He built the Confederacy on a political argument about Republic corruption, which means he understands legitimacy and he responds to it. You walk in there alone. You are a Padawan who has gone rogue. You walk in there with a senator of the Republic. You are an official delegation with standing. A pause. Tell me why that calculus is wrong. He cannot tell her that, because it isn't wrong. Because she is, as she has always been, 3 steps into the political architecture of any given situation, while everyone else is still finding the door. He nods. The goodbyes are brief in the way that important things often are. To Klieg, Anakin offers his hand across the kitchen table. Man to man, the formal offer of an equal. Klieg looks at it for 1 beat. Then he takes it, and his grip is the grip of someone who has spent 50 years deciding what is worth trusting and has made a decision about this. To Beru, quiet at the hatch, he says, "You're good for him. He needs someone who can see around his corners." She nods once, absorbing it without performance. To Owen, he says what needs saying and nothing else. Take care of her. Whatever happens next, whatever you hear, don't let anything take her from this farm. Owen, who has spent 24 hours revising his understanding of who this person is, and arriving somewhere he didn't expect to arrive, says, "I will." 2 words carrying the full weight of a man who does not make promises carelessly. Then Anakin goes to his mother. He holds her. Briefer this time, the goodbye of a soldier who has accepted the recurring cost of departure. She whispers something into his shoulder and he pulls back to look at her. "Come back," she says. Not a plea, not a question. A statement of what is required of him by someone who has earned the right to require it. "I will," he says. She holds his face in her hands one last time, looks at him. Then she lets go and steps back, and he turns and walks to the ship and does not look back. Because looking back is something he cannot afford right now, and she understands that and has already forgiven him for it. The transport clears Tatooine's atmosphere as the second sun reaches its apex. The desert below becomes abstract again, tan and ochre and distant, the homestead invisible from this height, the vaporator field indistinguishable from the natural ground, everything reduced to pattern and color. Padmé sits in the co-pilot's seat and watches the planet shrink behind them. In the original version of events, she says, after Geonosis, what happened to us? The question has weight. He handles it accordingly. We made every decision in secret, he says. We hid what we were to each other. The hiding is what broke us, not what we felt, but the architecture we built around it. He keeps his eyes on the navigation panel. In this timeline, we don't do that. You said we had children, twins. She is quiet for a long moment. Outside the viewport, the stars are emerging as Tatooine's suns fall behind them, clear and cold and in enormous number. One thing at a time, she says. Yes, he says. Geonosis first. He enters the coordinates. The ship shudders into hyperspace, and the stars become lines, and the lines become light, and the light becomes everything. Geonosis from orbit is the color of dried blood. The planet rotates beneath them in slow terracotta reds and deep shadow browns, its surface broken by the massive spire formations that rise from the desert floor like the remnants of something that died standing. No oceans, no cloud cover to speak of, just the exposed geology of a world that has never been gentle, cut through by wind into shapes that suggest violence even from this altitude. Anakin holds the ship in a standard approach vector and does not cloak it, does not run a deceptive flight path, does not attempt any of the evasion protocols that the original timeline required, because the original timeline arrived here as an intrusion. He is not intruding. He opens a direct hailing frequency on the Separatist command channel, the one he knows from memory, from years of intercepting and decoding it, and he transmits. This is Anakin Skywalker, Jedi Padawan aboard a Republic diplomatic transport. I am requesting an audience with Count Dooku. I am transmitting authorization from Senator Padmé Amidala of Naboo. We are approaching on a direct vector, and we are not armed beyond personal sidearms. We request landing clearance and immediate contact with Count Dooku's office. He releases the transmission and waits. Padmé looks at him. His office, she says. He thinks of himself as a head of state. Treat him like one and he behaves like one. Treat him like a war criminal and you get the army. Then a response, a Geonosian controller's clicking, translated by the ship's system into clipped basic, providing landing coordinates at the primary spire's lower platform. Anakin sets the course. "They told Dooku before they answered," he says. That pause was him deciding. What did he decide? That were more interesting as a conversation than as a problem. The landing platform juts from the primary spire's lower third, like a shelf of dark stone, broad enough for 3 ships of their size, currently empty. The wind at this altitude carries red-brown grit that scours the hull as they set down. The sound of it against the viewport is a constant low abrasion, patient and indifferent. They come down the ramp together. A Geonosian delegation meets them, 4 drones flanking a single Geonosian administrator, wings folded, posture arranged into something approximating formal reception. Behind them, at the spire entrance, 2 Magna Guard droids stand at positions that are not quite ceremonial and not quite threatening. The administrator clicks something, and the translation chip in Anakin's collar renders it as, "The Count will receive you. Weapons are to remain holstered. This is a courtesy." "Understood," Padmé says, before Anakin can respond. She is already Senator Amidala. The traveling clothes haven't changed, but something in her bearing has. The invisible architecture of authority assembling itself around her, the way it always does when she needs it. "Please extend our gratitude to the Count for his time." They are escorted inside. The interior of the spire is Geonosian construction, organic curves in dark stone, ceilings that arch overhead in ribbed vaults, the whole space lit by bioluminescent strips that run along the lower walls in dim amber. The sound is different inside. The wind is gone, replaced by a deep background hum from the foundry somewhere below, the sound of a war machine running at full production, and the distant clicking of Geonosian communication moving through the walls from chamber to chamber. Anakin walks through it with his hands at his sides, and his senses extended outward at the full range his body allows in this place. He feels the foundry workers below, thousands of them, the specific impersonal mass of a labor force. He feels the Magna Guards at intervals along the route, their lack of force presence, a kind of negative space he has learned to read as precisely as presence. He feels battle droids in standby configurations in the rooms they pass, ready, but not active. He feels Obi-Wan, further into the spire, 2 levels up, his force signature the familiar cool blue steadiness that Anakin would know anywhere, in any condition, constrained but unbroken. He does not deviate toward it, not yet. At the end of the corridor, the doors open. Count Dooku is standing at the window. This detail is deliberate. A seated man receives visitors. A standing man at a window is already in the room when you arrive, and has chosen not to turn around yet. It is a power arrangement. Anakin recognizes it because he used it himself, 10,000 times, on Star Destroyers and in Imperial audience chambers, the same performance of comfortable authority. Dooku turns when they enter. He is 73 years old, and carries it the way very few people carry age, not despite it but through it, the years having refined rather than diminished him. White hair, white beard, the aristocratic bone structure of the Sereno nobility, a bearing that communicates a lifetime of being the most accomplished person in any given room, and having sufficient evidence to support that assessment. He wears dark traveling clothes, not a uniform. Another deliberate signal. He is not playing soldier, he is playing statesman. He looks at Padmé first, then at Anakin. His expression, when it reaches Anakin, does something interesting. It considers something in Anakin's posture, or bearing, or force signature produces a moment of genuine recalibration in a man who is not accustomed to requiring it. "Senator Amidala," he says. His voice is a cultured instrument. "Your reputation for courageous political action is well established. I confess this particular action surpasses even that reputation." He moves toward them, unhurried, hands clasped behind his back. "And young Skywalker, I have heard a great deal about you." "I know," Anakin says. A pause. The word lands in an odd way, not arrogance, not performance, the simple statement of a man confirming a fact. Dooku reads it as such, and his expression adjusts by a fraction. "You've come about Kenobi," Dooku says. "We've come about the war," Padmé says. "Master Kenobi's situation is one part of a larger conversation that I believe you are capable of having." Then he gestures toward the chairs arranged in the room's center. "Then let us have it." Padmé speaks for 11 minutes. Anakin doesn't time it consciously. The count comes from the specific Vader-trained awareness of elapsed time in high-stakes situations. the internal clock that runs constantly and cannot be turned off. She speaks for 11 minutes without notes, without hesitation, without the performed passion of a politician working a crowd. She is precise. She is frank. She acknowledges the Republic's genuine failures, the corruption, the inequality, the systems that made the separatist argument compelling to thousands of worlds, with real grievances. She does not defend the indefensible. She defends the structure underneath it, the Senate, the principle, the possibility of reform that war forecloses permanently. She is, Anakin thinks, the finest political mind he has ever encountered, and he spent 2 decades watching Palpatine operate. Dooku listens. He's a good listener in the way that intelligent, proud men are sometimes good listeners, not because listening is natural to him, but because he is secure enough in his own position to be genuinely interested in a strong argument for the opposite view. He asks 2 questions, both of them sharp. Padmé answers, both without deflection. Then he looks at Anakin. "You've been quiet," he says. "You didn't need me yet," Anakin says. Dooku considers this. "And now, I need to tell you something that will be difficult to hear. I need you to hear it anyway. Permission. The man directing this movement, not the separatist cause, the man behind it, is using you," Anakin says. "You have a Sith master. You know him as Darth Sidious. I know him as Palpatine. The Chancellor of the Republic you left because it was corrupt is the Sith Lord who manufactured the corruption. He built the separatist movement the same way he built the Senate's dysfunction, as a controlled environment, a means to an end. The end is not separatist independence. The end is emergency powers, accumulated crisis by crisis, until the Senate votes him authority that has no constitutional limit and the Republic becomes something that no longer requires the name Republic." The room is very still. Dooku's expression has not moved. This is itself information. A man hearing something false shows something, contempt or amusement or dismissal. A man hearing something that cuts too close to a doubt he has already been managing shows nothing. He shows nothing. "That is a considerable accusation," he says finally. "You already suspect it," Anakin says. "You've suspected it for longer than you've admitted to yourself. He gives you pieces, he never gives you the complete picture. The decisions that seem to benefit the Confederacy always seem to benefit him more. You are too intelligent not to have noticed. You've been choosing not to follow the observation to its conclusion, because the conclusion is that you have spent years serving the thing you set out to destroy." The silence that follows is the longest one in the room so far. Dooku stands. He walks back to the window. He stands there with his hands clasped behind his back, and looks out at the Geonosian desert, and does not speak for a long time. When he turns back, something in his posture has shifted. Not broken, Dooku does not break, but reconfigured. The statesman arrangement is still there, but something underneath it has moved. "Release Kenobi," he says. Not to Anakin. To the Geonosian administrator at the door. The administrator leaves. Dooku looks at Anakin. "You understand that my releasing him changes nothing structurally. The Confederacy exists. The droid army exists. The grievances that built both of them are real, and they do not dissolve because the man who helped architect the crisis is identified." "I know," Anakin says. "We're not asking you to dissolve anything today. We're asking you to stop the battle that's about to start outside this spire." "What battle?" "The Jedi Council has had Master Kenobi's transmission for approximately 4 hours. A strike team is in hyperspace. It will arrive in the next 90 minutes. When it arrives and finds Kenobi alive and released, there is no battle. When it arrives and finds an execution in progress, there is." Anakin meets his eyes directly. "The clone army is also coming. That one we cannot stop today. But we can determine whether the first meeting between that army and the Confederacy's forces is a battle or a negotiated standoff. The difference between those two things is the difference between a 3-year war and a political crisis that might be resolved in 3 months." Dooku looks at him. Really looks. The assessment of an old Jedi Master reading the Force signature of a young one and finding something there that does not fit the frame he arrived with. "How old are you?" he says. 19, Anakin says. Dooku is quiet for a moment. "You don't fight like someone who is 19. "I don't." Obi-Wan arrives 10 minutes later, escorted by 2 Geonosian drones, and moving under his own power, which means he is not seriously injured, which is the first thing Anakin checks. He takes in the room in one sweep, Dooku at the window, Padmé in the chair, Anakin standing, and his expression goes through four things in rapid succession before settling on something that is mostly controlled bewilderment. Anakin, he says, "Master, you're supposed to be on Naboo. You're supposed to not get captured." Obi-Wan opens his mouth, closes it, looks at Dooku. "You released me. Your Padawan made a compelling argument," Dooku says, with the dry precision of a man who is not yet sure how he feels about that. Obi-Wan looks at Anakin again. The look contains several questions that cannot be asked in this room. Later, Anakin says quietly, the Jedi strike team arrives 73 minutes later. 212 of them, dropping from gunships onto the plains surrounding the primary spire, lightsabers ready for an arena that is not running, and an execution that has not happened. Mace Windu lands at the center of the formation and looks at the spire and looks at the three figures walking out to meet him across the red sand. He looks at the fact of Obi-Wan Kenobi alive and unrestrained and walking next to Anakin Skywalker under his own power. He looks at this for a long moment. Then he looks at Anakin with the expression of a man adding a new entry to a list that has been growing for some time. The list is titled, "In the Privacy of His Own Assessment, Things Anakin Skywalker Has Done That Require a Serious Conversation." "Skywalker," he says, "Master Windu, explain. Dooku has agreed to a temporary stand-down pending formal negotiation. Kenobi is released. The battle doesn't have to happen today." Mace looks at Obi-Wan, who nods once in confirmation. Mace looks at Padmé, who meets his gaze with the composed directness of a senator who has faced harder rooms than this. Mace looks back at Anakin. "The clone army is still coming," he says. "I know. That conversation is next. But not here, and not today." Behind Mace, 212 Jedi stand in the red Geonosian afternoon, with their lightsabers not yet lit, waiting for a signal. The signal that comes is not the one any of them prepared for on the journey here. Mace makes a contained gesture with his right hand, stand down, hold position, and turns back to Anakin. "The Council," he says, "is going to want to speak with you." "I know that too," Anakin says. "But first there's something you need to hear about the Chancellor." The spire casts its long shadow east. Somewhere in the distance the foundries have gone quiet, their production halted at Dooku's order, the absence of their hum leaving a silence that the desert fills immediately with its own older sounds. Mace Windu looks at the 19-year-old in front of him, who carries himself like a general and speaks like a man who has already lived through the alternative. "Talk," he says. "The briefing happens on the plain, not in the spire, not in a ship, not in any enclosed space that belongs to any single party. The plain itself, open red Geonosian ground with the wind moving across it freely and nothing overhead but the sky, is the only neutral ground available, and Anakin chooses it deliberately. 212 Jedi standing in loose formation, Padmé to his left, Obi-Wan to his right, Mace Windu 3 meters in front of him with his arms at his sides, and his attention absolute. Anakin talks for 22 minutes. He does not use notes. He does not hedge. He presents the architecture of Palpatine's operation the way a military commander presents an enemy's order of battle, sequentially, specifically, with sources named and evidence located, and the logical connections between each piece laid out in language that requires no interpretation. The Sith infiltration of the Republic, the manufactured separatist crisis, the clone army commissioned through a dead Jedi's identity, the inhibitor chips, Order 66, the emergency powers framework that transforms a chancellor into an emperor 1 Senate vote at a time. He watches their faces as he talks. The Jedi Masters at the front of the formation, Kit Fisto, Plo Koon, Ki-Adi Mundi, the others who came here expecting a rescue and got something considerably more complicated, move through skepticism and into a careful, reluctant engagement as the internal consistency of what he is saying becomes impossible to dismiss. These are not people who accept claims easily. They are trained to read truth in the Force, to sense the specific texture of sincerity versus performance, and what they are sensing from Anakin is neither the bright simplicity of someone telling a truth they have just learned, nor the discordant pressure of fabrication. What they are sensing is the flat, exhausted specificity of someone reporting things they have known for a very long time. Mace does not interrupt. This is itself a form of response. A man who interrupts when he hears something wrong and is not interrupting. When Anakin finishes, the plane is quiet for a moment except for the wind. "The inhibitor chips," Mace says. "You said organic, implanted during development." during embryonic development on Kamino. They're undetectable through standard medical scanning because they're designed to be read as natural neural tissue. The Kaminoans know what they are. They were told the chips ensure loyalty and limit independent cognition. The actual function is a single command execution protocol. Order 66, Obi-Wan says. He says it quietly. The way you say a thing, you are still translating from abstract to real. When Palpatine transmits the order, every clone trooper in the galaxy will turn on their Jedi commanders simultaneously. It is designed to be total. No warning, no escalation. One moment, your troops are your troops. The next moment, they are not. Ki-Adi-Mundi speaks from the second rank. This is an extraordinary claim about a man the Order has worked alongside for decades. I know what it is, Anakin says. I also know that the Jedi shrine beneath the Coruscant Temple has been leaking dark side energy upward into the council chambers. For 1,000 years, the Sith built it there deliberately. It is why the council's perception has been clouded. It is why Palpatine has been invisible to you in plain sight. He looks at Mundi directly. You have sensed that something is wrong with the Republic for years. Every one of you has. The darkness you have been attributing to the Separatist crisis is not coming from Geonosis. It is coming from underneath your own building. The silence that follows has a different quality than the one before it. Mace takes 3 steps away from the group and stands with his back to them for a moment. To an observer who didn't know him, this would look like doubt. Anakin knows it is the opposite. It is the posture of a man running his Shatterpoint ability at full extension, pushing it outward toward Coruscant, toward the concept of Palpatine, feeling for the fault lines in the structure of things. What Mace finds, he does not describe in words. He turns back around with an expression that has resolved into something harder and quieter than what it was before. Yoda needs to hear this, he says. Today, Yoda needs to do more than hear it, Anakin says. He needs to feel for it himself. Palpatine's concealment technique is refined, but it has a limit. It requires that the person looking not be specifically looking for it. The moment a master of Yoda's sensitivity directs his full attention at Palpatine with the question already formed, the concealment fails. It is not strong enough to survive a direct search. It is only strong enough to survive an indirect one. Why hasn't it failed already? Plo Koon asks. Because nobody has looked directly. You've all been in proximity to Palpatine for years, and every one of those interactions was colored by an existing assumption of trust. The Force reads through the frame you bring to it. Bring the wrong frame, you see what the frame allows. A pause. Bring the right question, you see everything. Has been looking at him for most of this briefing, with an expression that is trying to find somewhere to settle and not finding it. Anakin, he says, where did you learn this? The inhibitor chips, the shrine, Palpatine's technique? This isn't intelligence the Order has. This isn't anything I've ever read in the Temple archives. How do you know these things? The plane goes quiet. Everyone is listening now in a different way, not to an intelligence briefing, but to the question underneath all the intelligence. Anakin looks at his former master. I know them the way anyone knows something they have had a very long time to think about, he says. Some things I will explain in full when there is time. Right now, the timeline matters more than the explanation. Palpatine does not yet know that Dooku released Kenobi. When he finds out, he will know something has deviated. He will begin adapting. We have a window, and it is not large. Obi-Wan holds the look for another moment. Then he nods. Because trust is a practice, and he has been practicing it in the direction of this man for a decade. And he is not going to stop now when it is most difficult. They divide the work on the plane before anyone boards a ship. Mace takes the strike team back to Coruscant on the fastest available transport. His task is Yoda, getting the ancient master to direct his full perception at Palpatine specifically and deliberately, which requires a conversation that cannot happen over comms. Mace is the only person in the Order who can have that conversation with Yoda in the terms it requires. Obi-Wan takes Dooku's stand-down agreement back to the Council as a formal document, witnessed by Senator Amidala, which transforms it from a battlefield claim into a political reality. His credibility with the Council is different from Mace's, quieter, more evidential, and the document needs his name on it. Padmé contacts her office on Coruscant and begins the secondary operation. The senators she trusts, the ones who have been quietly raising questions about the emergency power's trajectory for years, need to be briefed and positioned before Palpatine realizes the ground is moving. She does this from the co-pilot seat of the Naboo transport as Anakin lifts them off Geonosis, speaking in the precise, layered language of Senate politics that sounds like routine legislative coordination to anyone listening and is in fact the construction of a firewall around a man who does not yet know he needs to be contained. Anakin flies. He listens to her work and says nothing. She is extraordinary at this. She always has been. Coruscant, from the approach vector, looks the same as it always looks. The planet city, every surface built upon. Light from billions of sources turning the whole sphere into something that glows from within like a living thing. He has approached this planet from this vector 1,000 times. As a Padawan, as a knight, as Vader descending to receive orders and deliver reports, and stand in rooms where the Emperor held court and the galaxy was administered like a private estate. He holds the ship in the approach lane and breathes. "You've gone somewhere," Padmé says. She has finished her calls. She is watching him with the attention she always gives the things she is trying to understand. "I'm here," he says. "You're here and somewhere else simultaneously. You do that sometimes." He doesn't deny it. "I've landed on this planet a great many times," he says. "Not all of the memories are good ones." She is quiet for a moment. "The ones that are good, are any of them here? On Coruscant?" He thinks about it honestly. The temple at dawn seen from the training courtyard before anyone else was awake. The archives, in the deep of the night, when the only sound was the climate system, and the shelves went on further than the light reached. Obi-Wan laughing at something in the council anteroom, the genuine, unguarded laugh that he rationed carefully and gave freely to almost no one. These are Coruscant memories. They are good ones. "Some," he says. She nods and looks back at the planet filling the viewport. "Then we'll make more." They land at a civilian dock in the middle ring. Not the temple dock, not the Senate landing platforms. Somewhere unremarkable where a Naboo transport attracts no particular attention. Anakin has arranged the next meeting through R2, who has been running secure transmissions since Geonosis. And the arrangement is specific about location for specific reasons. The location is a tea house in the Uskrew district, 3 levels above the entertainment belt, 2 below the Senate residential towers. The precise altitude of the city where the wealthy pass through but nobody lives, which means no neighbors and no patterns. Anakin chose it from a list of places he knows are not under any active surveillance. He knows this because he checked the surveillance assignments himself, in another life, as the man who set many of them. Yoda is already there. He sits in the corner booth with a cup of something warm and his gimmer stick propped against the seat beside him, and his eyes closed. He looks, at a casual glance, like a very old creature resting. He is not resting. Anakin can feel the radius of his awareness extending outward through the Force, in a slow, steady pulse, a passive monitoring scan that covers the entire floor and the 2 above and below it. Nobody approaches this booth without Yoda knowing about it from 30 meters out. Mace is beside him. He looks up when Anakin and Padmé enter. Anakin sits across from Yoda. Padmé takes the adjacent seat and says nothing, and does not need to be told why. Yoda opens his eyes. He looks at Anakin for a long moment, not with suspicion, with attention. The specific total attention of 900 years of developed perception directed at a single object without agenda. He is not deciding what he thinks. He is looking before he decides. "Reached us," Master Windu's message did. Yoda says. "On the way here, much to consider. There was." He tilts his head. "Look at you." "I have. Since Geonosis in the Force. Something different there is." "Yes." Anakin says. "Tell me what." The instruction is simple. Absolute. Not a request. Anakin tells him. Not the full accounting he gave on the plane. Yoda does not need the political architecture laid out piece by piece. He needs the truth at the center of it, the essential thing, and he needs it without packaging. So Anakin gives it without packaging. In another version of events, I fell to the dark side. I served Palpatine for over 20 years as Darth Vader. I know what he is and what he intends, because I lived inside his operation from the inside. I came back to prevent it. The tea house makes its small ambient sounds, cups and low conversation from the other tables, the distant throb of the entertainment district below, the climate system's barely audible hum. Yoda does not move. His ears stay exactly where they are. His eyes stay on Anakin. "Believe you," he says. "I do not say. Disbelieve you? I do not say either." A pause. "What I say is this. In the force, a void I have sensed around the Chancellor for many years. Attributed it to the political weight he carries, I did. The dark side of doubt that all power generates. Dismissed it, his ears lower by a fraction. My error. Sit with that, I must. There isn't time to sit with it, Mace says. Not impatiently, practically. Time to act without certainty there is never, Yoda says. And yet, he picks up his cup, sets it down without drinking. Certain enough I am. Feel for him directly I will. Tonight, he does it in the tea house. He does not go to the temple. He does not go to a meditation chamber. He simply closes his eyes in the corner booth and goes inward and then outward, extending his 900 years of refined perception in a single deliberate direction. Toward the Senate district, toward the executive building, toward the specific force signature of Sheev Palpatine, Chancellor of the Republic, which Yoda has touched 1,000 times without pressing, without asking the specific question. Now he asks. The table is very quiet. Mace sits with his hands flat on the surface and his jaw set. Padmé watches Yoda and does not speak. Anakin watches the old master's face and waits. It takes 40 seconds. Yoda opens his eyes. He is still for a moment, in a way that is different from his previous stillness. Not the stillness of concentration, but the stillness of something that has been confirmed and requires a moment to become real. There, he says quietly, hidden in plain sight, 1,000 years of practiced concealment. His voice carries something Anakin has never heard in it in either lifetime. Something that in a younger being would be called grief. Our arrogance, our assumption. He looks at Anakin. Right, you are. A Sith Lord he is. The Sith Lord. A pause. Felt it. I should have felt it decades ago. The shrine beneath the temple, Anakin says. It has been clouding perception from below. It is not your failure. It was engineered. It does not entirely comfort him, and he does not pretend it does. Engineered or not, he says, missed it we did. He straightens in his seat. The grief does not disappear, but it moves to one side, making room. What is done, is done. What must be done, that is the question now. He looks at Mace, then at Anakin. Together, he says, we move together, and we do not make the mistake of underestimating what we are walking toward. Outside, Coruscant churns on in its billions of lights, indifferent and enormous, unaware that in a tea house 3 levels above the entertainment district, the trap that has been set for it across a generation has just been seen clearly for the first time. The window is still open. They move. Palpatine knows something is wrong at the precise moment Dooku releases Kenobi. Not because anyone tells him. The report from Geonosis arrives through official channels 40 minutes after the fact, routed through 3 intermediary systems the way all sensitive separatist communications are routed. And by the time the words reach him, the situation they describe is already history. But Palpatine does not need the report. He has known something is wrong since before the report existed. In the way that a man who has constructed a machine from 10,000 precisely interdependent parts knows, from a change in the sound, from a vibration that shouldn't be there, that something inside it has shifted. He is in his private office when it happens. The public office, the one with the curved windows and the Senate view, and the chairs arranged for the management of visitors, is 2 rooms away. This room is smaller, no chairs for visitors, because visitors do not come here. A single desk, a single lamp, walls lined with documents that are not what their labels say they are, and a window that faces east toward the Jedi Temple. He stands at that window when the feeling arrives. It is not dramatic, it does not announce itself. It is a subtle wrongness, a deviation in the pattern he has been maintaining and monitoring for over a decade. The vast, invisible architecture of manipulation that runs from the Senate floor to the Camino cloning vats, to the separatist war rooms on a dozen systems. He has tended this architecture the way a master craftsman tends a mechanism of extraordinary complexity, making constant small adjustments, feeling for tension and release, knowing at any given moment exactly what every component is doing. Something has moved that he did not move. He turns from the window and sits at his desk and is very still for a moment. His eyes, in this room with no audience, are not the warm and weary eyes of an overburdened public servant. They are measuring. They are old. They are the eyes of something that has been playing a very long game and has just heard an unexpected sound from inside the board. He begins to think. The variables present themselves in order of immediacy. Geonosis. Kenobi was meant to be held through the night, released in the morning after the strike team arrived and the first exchange of fire had committed both sides to the engagement. The battle needed to begin in a specific way, chaotic, reactive, the Jedi and the clone army arriving simultaneously without coordination, the first use of the clones occurring in the confusion of a rescue rather than the deliberation of a deployment. That sequence produces a specific political result: a grateful Senate, an emergency already in progress, a military already in use. The powers he needs follow as a practical necessity rather than a constitutional debate. Someone interrupted that sequence. He cross-references what he knows. The Jedi strike team went to Geonosis. That much he anticipated. What he did not anticipate is the stand-down. Dooku does not stand down. Dooku is precise and proud and operates according to a framework of principles that have made him predictable in the ways Palpatine needs him to be predictable. For Dooku to release Kenobi and accept a stand-down means someone said something to him that penetrated his framework. Someone who knew enough to find the leverage point. The Padawan. The thought arrives fully formed. Anakin Skywalker, who was supposed to be on Naboo, who is instead apparently on Geonosis, who has been producing deviations from expected behavior since the night of the Coruscant assassination attempt 3 weeks ago. The assassination that was resolved too cleanly. The bounty hunters taken alive rather than silenced. The abilities displayed by a 19-year-old that do not correspond to any 19-year-old's abilities in the history of Jedi records. Palpatine opens the surveillance file on Anakin Skywalker that he has been building since that night. He reads it carefully. All of it. The reports from Temple observers, the council session summaries his sources have managed to intercept, the behavioral analyses from the 2 Jedi assigned to watch Kenobi's Padawan in the weeks following Coruscant. He reads the account of the Tusken situation on Tatooine. No battle, no massacre. The raiding party simply gone, dispersed overnight by a single individual who left no evidence of violence. He reads the Geonosis report as it comes in. Piecemeal, the observer's account of Skywalker walking across an open plain to negotiate rather than infiltrate. He sets the file down. He is quiet for a long time. What Palpatine is feeling, in the private architecture of himself that no one has ever been permitted to observe, is not fear. Fear is for beings who have not eliminated the causes of fear through sufficient preparation. What he is feeling is something more precise and more dangerous than fear. It is the focused attention of an apex predator that has detected for the first time in a very long time something it cannot immediately categorize. He reaches out through the Force, carefully. The technique he uses is not the broad, ambient sensing of a Jedi in meditation. It is a targeted extension, surgical, directed specifically at the boy's Force signature. He has touched Anakin's presence before, many times in their private meetings. He knows the specific texture of it the way a musician knows a particular instrument. Enormous raw power, barely contained, lit through with the bright instability of passionate attachment. That is what Anakin Skywalker's Force signature has always felt like. What he finds now is different. The power is the same. If anything, more consolidated, the vast midichlorian count expressing itself with a clarity and control that it did not have 3 weeks ago. But the texture underneath the power is wrong. The passionate instability is still there, but it is no longer the dominant frequency. Underneath it, running through it like a structural element that was always there and has only now become visible, is something old, something worn. Something that has been carrying weight for a very long time and has developed, through the carrying of it, a density and a patience that should not exist in a 19-year-old's relationship with the Force. He withdraws, processes. The boy has changed, not developed. Changed. The distinction matters. Development follows a predictable arc. Change of this kind, this fundamental, this fast, does not have a predictable arc. It suggests some external cause of significant magnitude. He thinks about the night in Varakino that his surveillance cannot penetrate. He thinks about every deviation since then. He thinks about the specific knowledge Anakin appears to have demonstrated, the bounty hunters, the Tusken timing, the Geonosis coordinates, the conversation with Dooku that produced a result his own 20 years of Dooku management never achieved. A man who knows things he should not know, a man who moves through events as if he has seen them before. Palpatine is very still at his desk for a long time. Then, he activates his communications array and begins making calls. The first call is to his Senate intelligence network. 6 individuals embedded across 3 committees, each of them cultivated over years, each of them owing him something they cannot repay through any other currency than information. He tells them what to look for: any unusual contact between Jedi Council members in the last 24 hours, any movement of senior masters toward Coruscant, any anomalous activity in or around the temple. The responses come back within the hour. Mace Windu returned from Geonosis ahead of the main strike team on a fast courier. He went directly to the temple and directly to Yoda's chambers, and the meeting lasted 90 minutes. Windu then left the temple in civilian clothes and was tracked to the Uskru district before the observer lost visual contact. 3 hours ago, Yoda himself left the temple, also in civilian clothes. This has not happened in 11 years. Palpatine reads this report twice. Yoda leaving the temple in civilian clothes is not an event that fits into any existing category of things that happen. Yoda does not conduct clandestine meetings. Yoda does not require the cover of anonymity. If the ancient master is moving in concealment, it means the subject of his movement is something he does not want observed. It means he is not moving as the Grand Master of the Jedi Order. He is moving as an individual who has decided to act before the institution has caught up with his decision. This is the behavior of a being who has been shown something that requires immediate response and has chosen speed over procedure. Palpatine closes the report, opens a new channel, a different network, not Senate intelligence this time, but the specific private channel that connects him to the red-uniformed Senate Guard commander who has been his personal instrument for 9 years. He gives a series of instructions. The commander confirms each one without question. The channel closes. He sits back. He is not panicking. The word does not apply. But he is accelerating his timeline, which is what panic looks like in a man of his particular construction. Not disorder, but speed. The controlled compression of a sequence that was supposed to unfold over months being forced into days or hours because the operating conditions have changed. The emergency powers request cannot wait for the Clone War to establish itself properly. He needs a crisis now, tonight. Something that requires the Senate to act before it has time to think. Something that produces the specific political pressure that turns deliberating legislators into a frightened body that votes for the thing in front of them, because the alternative is uncertainty. He begins constructing it. The separatist threat is still real. The stand down on Geonosis is one planet. The droid army is not disbanded. The Confederacy is intact. He can work with that. He has allies in the Senate who will respond to the right framing of the right information, a targeted emergency communication delivered tonight through the right channels, describing the Geonosis situation not as a resolved standoff, but as a temporary reprieve. The droid foundry still operating, the separatist fleet still mobilized, the Republic still without a military of its own. He does not need to fabricate anything. He needs only to frame what is true in the light that produces the response he requires. He begins drafting the communication. He is halfway through it when his force perception pulses with something that stops his hand on the desk. He reaches outward again, not toward Anakin this time. Toward the ambient force of the city, the broad feeling of it, the specific texture of Coruscant's vast living presence that he has been reading for decades, the way a sailor reads water. He knows the city's force signature the way he knows his own heartbeat. He knows its rhythms and its anomalies, and what each anomaly means. What he feels now is a directed attention. Somewhere in this city, something very old and very powerful is looking for something. The search has a quality he recognizes because he has evaded it before. But those previous evasions relied on the searcher not knowing specifically what to look for. The attention he is feeling now is not general. It is not the Jedi's habitual ambient monitoring, the passive environmental awareness they maintain as a matter of practice. This attention knows what it is looking for. It is looking for him. His concealment technique activates immediately, reflexively, the product of decades of practice. He pulls his force signature inward, compresses it, wraps it in the layers of emotional complexity he has refined across a lifetime. The genuine concerns of a burdened chancellor, the authentic tiredness of a man who has carried the Republic's weight for too long, the real relationships and real memories and real political investments that form the surface of Sheev Palpatine's identity. He buries himself in his own cover and holds it with the absolute steadiness of a man who has done this 10,000 times. But he can feel the attention pressing against the outer edges of his concealment, probing. Not fooled. Yoda, the recognition is immediate and cold, Only Yoda, at full directed extension with specific intent, produces a search of this sensitivity. He has evaded Yoda before, but those evasions happened when the search was ambient, when the Grand Master was not looking for anything specific. The search he is feeling now is specific. It knows there is something to find. It is only determining the precise location. Palpatine holds his concealment absolutely rigid, and simultaneously thinks through his options in the space of 4 seconds. The timeline has not merely accelerated, it has collapsed. He cannot draft communications. He cannot manage Senate allies. He cannot construct the patient political architecture that was supposed to carry him through the next 6 months to absolute power. If Yoda has found him, if the Council knows, if Anakin Skywalker has given them enough to look with the right question, then the machinery he has built across 40 years is worth nothing, because machinery requires time to operate, and time is the thing he no longer has. He has one move. He has always had one move of last resort, prepared for the scenario he never genuinely believed would arrive, the scenario where the Jedi found him before he was ready. He opens the bottom drawer of his desk, removes a lightsaber, not the one he keeps for visitors, the real one, curved grip, ancient design, the weapon of Darth Sidious that has not been drawn in this office in 11 years of careful political theater. He ignites it briefly. The crimson blade fills the private office with red light, and he extinguishes it immediately, checking the crystal's charge. Full. He replaces it in the drawer and closes it. He composes his face into the expression of Sheev Palpatine, Chancellor, and walks to his desk terminal and summons his guards. He needs to move first. Before they come to him, before they arrive with their collective weight and their lightsabers, and the ancient master who has finally, after all these years, looked in the right direction. The office door opens. His red guards file in and arrange themselves and look at him for instruction. He looks back at them. "Lock the building down," he says, in the warm and measured voice of a man who has spent 40 years practicing concern. "I have reason to believe there is a security threat to the executive office. Contact no one outside this chain of command." The guards move, the locks engage. The building seals. Across the city, in a tea house 3 levels above the entertainment district, Yoda opens his eyes and looks at Mace Windu. "Moving," Yoda says. "He is moving." They come to him in the way that he did not come to them. Not through the main entrance of the Republic Executive Building. That approach is sealed, the blast doors engaged. The guard complement tripled in the 20 minutes since Palpatine locked the building down. They come through the service infrastructure, a maintenance corridor that runs along the building's eastern spine from the ground level to the 43rd floor, accessible through a utility junction in the adjacent Senate Annex that has not been on any active security rotation for 11 years because no one has ever needed to monitor a corridor that connects a climate control station to a filing archive. Anakin knows about the corridor because he used it once, in the other life, to extract an injured officer from a building under rebel siege. The memory of it is precise. The corridor width, the junction points, the specific door that opens into the executive level's service alcove, 14 meters from Palpatine's private office. He leads, Mace behind him, Yoda behind Mace, moving with the deceptive speed the Gimmer stick conceals, his presence in the Force pulled in tight against himself, contained, a small and patient thing that gives nothing away to any outward scan. Behind Yoda, Kit Fisto and Ajin Kolar, selected by Mace before they left the tea house, contacted through secured comms, met at the Annex Junction with their lightsabers already on their belts, and their questions already set aside in the way of Jedi who have been in enough situations to know when questions come after. No one speaks in the corridor. The only sounds are footsteps and the building's ventilation system, a deep rhythmic breath moving through the walls. Anakin stops at the service door. 14 meters. He reaches through the Force and maps the space beyond it. Palpatine's private office. He knows its layout from the original timeline, from 100 reports and 2 personal visits, from the specific spatial memory of a man who was brought here once as an apprentice and received his first Imperial assignment standing on the dark stone floor with the east window behind him and the Emperor seated at the desk that faced it. He maps it now against what he can feel through the Force. The desk, the window, the guards arranged in the outer room, and Palpatine himself, standing at the east window, not seated, standing, the posture of a man who is waiting for something and has chosen the position he will be in when it arrives. He knows they are coming. Anakin turns and communicates this with his eyes. Mace reads it immediately. Yoda's ears move by a fraction. The formation adjusts, not dramatically, a small shift in spacing that changes the geometry of what happens when the door opens. Anakin puts his hand on the door. The service alcove opens to the left of the corridor that connects Palpatine's private office to the outer chambers. The arrangement gives them the wall. They come through quickly and without announcement. Anakin first, into the space, reading the room in the first half-second, and moving to the position that gives him the widest sightline. Mace through behind him, flanking right. Fisto and Kolar taking the door positions. Yoda last, the door closing behind him. Palpatine turns from the window. He is wearing the Chancellor's robes. The full formal arrangement of Sheev Palpatine, public servant, dark fabric, careful tailoring, the presentation of a man of civic dignity. His hands are visible, clasped before him. His face is arranged in an expression of composed concern, the face of a man who is surprised by this intrusion and choosing to respond to it with the patience appropriate to his office. It is a superb performance. It would work on anyone who had not spent 20 years watching it from the inside. "Master Windu," he says, the voice is warm, tired, slightly bewildered. "This is highly irregular. My guards are in the outer room," Mace says. "We are not here through the outer room." He steps fully into the office. His right hand is at his side, not on his lightsaber. "Not yet. We are here because we need to have a conversation that cannot wait for an appointment." "Of course." The Chancellor makes a small gesture toward the chairs. "Please, Sheev Palpatine," Mace says. "You are under arrest for conspiracy against the Republic, for the orchestration of the Separatist crisis, and for operating as a Sith Lord." The room goes absolutely still. Palpatine looks at Mace for a long moment. Then his eyes move, controlled, unhurried, to Yoda, to Anakin, back to Mace. The expression on his face does not change. It rearranges. The bewildered concern does not disappear, so much as it is reassigned. The same elements, repositioned into something that reads as grieved disbelief. The face of a man hearing something so far beyond the pale that his primary response is sorrow for the people saying it. "I see," he says quietly. "This is a very serious moment." He looks at Anakin. "My boy, whatever you've been told, don't," Anakin says. One word. Flat. Carrying in its flatness everything that a longer response would dilute. Palpatine stops. Something moves behind his eyes. The rearrangement again. Faster this time, a more fundamental shift, the performance finding new parameters in real time. He looks at Anakin with an attention that is different from all the previous looks. More direct, less managed. "You know," Palpatine says. "Not performing now. Assessing. I know everything," Anakin says. "I have known since Vade Kino." A pause. The east window fills the room with the gray morning light of early Coruscant, the Senate district visible beyond it in its enormous architecture of government. The ventilation system breathes through the walls. Palpatine moves. There is no transition. One moment he is a chancellor standing at his window in his robes, and the next moment he is not that at all. The transformation is not physical. The body is the same, the robes are the same, the face is the same, but the force signature that has been wrapped in 40 years of careful concealment simply drops. What emerges in its place is what was always there underneath, the specific dark pressure of a Sith master who has been patient for a very long time, and is now done being patient. Both lightsabers come from the sleeves simultaneously. Hidden compartments, spring-loaded, a mechanism he has been carrying for decades and has deployed twice in the original timeline. The twin crimson blades ignite in the same motion as the draw, filling the room with red light and the specific electric hiss of plasma at operational temperature. He is faster than he looks. He is faster than almost anything. Agan Kolar is closest, and Palpatine reaches him first. A lunge from standing, covering 3 meters in a movement that the eye registers as continuous, but physics insists must have had intermediate points. His left blade catches Kolar's igniting saber at an angle that locks it, and his right blade comes around in a movement aimed at ending the engagement immediately. Anakin is already moving. Not toward Kolar, toward Palpatine's right flank, his own blade ignited, interposing between the right blade and its target. The sabers meet with an impact that rattles the desk and cracks the office window behind Palpatine. Kolar pulls back, not struck, his guard reconfiguring. Mace engages from the left. His Vapod draws on the dark side energy Palpatine is pouring into the room, conducting it. recycling it. In the enclosed space, the effect is immediate. The more Palpatine attacks, the more power Mace has to channel back. The loop is established in the first 3 exchanges, and Palpatine feels it. Anakin can see him feel it in the fractional adjustment of his positioning, putting Mace at a slightly less direct angle. Kit Fisto takes the adjustment as the opening it is, and comes in from the right. 3 Jedi Masters, and Anakin in a room with Darth Sidious. In the original timeline, this ended badly. In the original timeline, the configuration was different. The approaches were sequential rather than simultaneous, and the Masters did not know what they were walking into with the specificity that changes every calculation. This is not the original timeline. The private office is not large enough for 7 people and 6 lightsabers. The desk goes first. Palpatine moves across it rather than around it. A single controlled step onto the surface and off the other side. And Anakin cuts it in half on the backstroke to deny him the position. The 2 halves separate and fall. Documents scatter. The lamp goes dark. Palpatine is extraordinary. There is no other word that fits. At 73 years old, he moves with a speed and precision that has nothing to do with the body's age and everything to do with the dark side's willingness to spend the body's resources freely, running it past its natural limits without accounting for the cost. His Form 7 Juyo generates attacks from angles that the room's geometry should make impossible. Off the wall, across the ceiling corner, a horizontal strike that comes from a position his body should not be able to occupy. He is simultaneously fighting 3 distinct opponents, and using each engagement to create angles on the others. He is also talking. "You were always the variable," he says to Anakin, "not losing form, not losing breath." The words fitted between blade movements with the precision of a man who has had a very long time to think about what he would say if it ever came to this. I felt it from the beginning, something excessive, something that exceeded the frame. A thrust at Mace, deflected. A pivot to answer Kit Fisto's attack from the right. I should have moved faster with you. My error. Anakin does not respond. He is not fighting emotionally, he is fighting technically, which is a distinction that the original timeline's Anakin could not have maintained, and which this version of him maintains through the specific discipline of a man who has already given his grief and rage their full expression across 20 years and has none left to spend here. He watches Palpatine move. He has studied this fighting style from the inside, from reports and recordings, and the Emperor's own occasional demonstrations in the throne room, when he was feeling expansive. He knows the specific tell that precedes a lightning deployment, a slight shift in foot position, the left heel rotating outward by perhaps 5 degrees as the stance widens to accommodate the draw from the center. He has been watching for it since the first exchange. He sees it. He does not shout a warning. He steps back into the left and raises his blade horizontally and says, very quietly, "Left." Mace hears it, goes right. Yoda moves. The lightning comes from both of Palpatine's hands simultaneously, a full bilateral discharge aimed at covering the maximum possible arc. It is the room-clearing technique, the one designed to overwhelm multiple targets without the precision single-target lightning requires. In the original throne room, it was used to kill Anakin. In a smaller space with a lower ceiling, it should be devastating. Mace catches the left arc on his blade. The Vapad loop flares, the energy conducting recycling, the purple blade blazing with the additional power and directed back into the exchange. Yoda catches the right arc. Not on a blade. He raises one hand, 3-fingered and ancient, and takes it. The lightning runs into him, and he disperses it through the Force with the patient authority of 900 years of practice, releasing it harmlessly into the building's stone floor. In the gap that the discharge creates, the half-second of recovered position following a full bilateral extension, Anakin moves. He covers the distance in 2 steps. His blade does not go for a kill. It goes for the weapons. A controlled downward arc that catches both of Palpatine's hilts at the crossguards and drives them out of alignment, and then a force push from the free hand, not large, not dramatic, precisely calculated, that separates Palpatine from both ignited sabers simultaneously. The crimson blades clatter to the floor, still ignited, casting red light across the broken room. Palpatine stands without his weapons in a room with 5 Jedi and looks at Anakin with an expression that has moved entirely past performance. He is breathing. Controlled, because he is always controlled, but the deep mechanism behind the control is working harder than it has in years. His face in the red light of his own abandoned sabers is the face of a man recalculating the fundamental premises of a plan he has been executing for decades, finding that the recalculation produces no viable continuation. "You've changed the variables," he says. "Yes," Anakin says. "How?" Not a question of tactics, a genuine inquiry. The intellectual interest of a man who has been surprised and cannot, even now, entirely suppress the reflexive engagement with how. "I've already lived the alternative." Something moves across his face. Not quite recognition, not quite understanding, but the outline of both. Then it is gone, replaced by the specific composure of a man who has decided that the conversation is over and that what comes next is not conversation. He reaches for his Force powers with the full intent to use them as a weapon in a room too enclosed for the Jedi to avoid all of them. He finds them occupied. Yoda has been quiet since catching the lightning. He has been doing something with the Force that requires no visible expression and produces no obvious light or sound. He has been the 900-year wait of a fully realized master applying his entire capacity to a single purpose, the suppression of another Force user's active power. Not permanently, not completely. For long enough. The Force lightning builds in Palpatine's hands and stops. Not deflected, stopped, held at the generation point, like a voice that can make no sound. The room is very still. Mace picks up both crimson lightsabers from the floor and extinguishes them. The red light dies. The gray morning comes back through the cracked window. Ordinary, unhurried, the city going about its vast ordinary business in the streets below. Palpatine looks at his hands, then at Yoda, then at Anakin. "Well," he says, in something very close to his normal voice. The performance is back, because the performance is all he has left, and he will not give them the satisfaction of the absence of it. "It appears I have underestimated you." "Yes," Anakin says. "You have. The durasteel restraints that Kit Fisto produces from his belt are not ceremonial. They are functional." Palpatine extends his wrists with the particular dignity of a man choosing how he is seen in a moment he cannot otherwise control. And the restraints close, and Darth Sidious, Sith Master, architect of the Empire that will not now exist, is under arrest. Somewhere far below them in the building, the locked blast doors begin to cycle open, as Mace's signal reaches the security system, overriding Palpatine's lockdown with the Council's emergency authority. The morning comes through the broken window. The city turns below. It is done. The Senate knows by mid-morning. Not through official channels. Those are still being organized, the Council in emergency session, the Republic's legal apparatus beginning the slow, enormous work of processing something it has no existing framework for. The Senate knows the way the Senate always knows things, that the official channels are still constructing. Through proximity, through the specific osmosis of a building full of politicians whose entire professional survival depends on knowing what is happening before it is announced. The executive building's lockdown, the Jedi entering through non-standard access, the blast doors cycling open 40 minutes later under Counselor authority rather than Chancellor authority, the absence of Palpatine from the 3 morning briefings he never misses. These pieces move through the Senate district in the space of 2 hours, fitting themselves together in the minds of people trained to assemble incomplete information into working pictures. By the time Padmé walks onto the Senate floor, the picture is mostly assembled. She can see it in the room, the particular quality of attention that a legislative body produces when it knows something enormous has happened and is waiting to be told what to do with it. Every delegation is in conversation. The normal pre-session movement is compressed, tighter, people staying in clusters rather than crossing the floor. The noise level is wrong, too low and too intense simultaneously. She takes her pod, and she does not perform calm. She is calm. There is a distinction. Her comlink has been active since she left the tea house. The 6 senators she contacted last night, positioned and briefed and ready, are watching her for the signal. She gives it with a single message. Confirmed. Move now. 6 comlinks across the chamber receive it, and 6 senators begin the coordination that she spent hyperspace and a Geonosian landing pad and a night on Tatooine planning. The session gavel comes down. The Senate calls itself to order. Padmé Amidala does not know where Palpatine is. This is evident from the moment the vice chair takes the presiding chair, a man who has managed his own uncertainty for years in this building, who is skilled at the composed surface of someone waiting for instruction, is not composed. He is performing composition, which is different, and Padmé can see the difference from 50 meters. He calls the session to order and immediately refers to emergency protocols, which tells her everything she needs to know about what he has and has not been told. He has been told there is a security situation. He has not been told its nature. She lets the session run for 12 minutes, long enough for the room to generate its own momentum, the questions, the procedural challenges, the carefully managed confusion that fills a legislative body when its center of gravity is suddenly absent. She lets that confusion become the dominant weather of the chamber. Then she activates her pod's speaker request. The recognition comes because Mas Amedda has no reason to deny it, and several reasons to welcome something that looks like procedural stability. He recognizes the senator from Naboo. Padmé stands. She speaks for 9 minutes. She does not begin with Palpatine. She begins with the Republic, with the document, with the principles, with the specific promises that the founding charter makes to the systems that joined it, because she knows that what she is about to tell this room will be processed through the frame she gives it, and the frame she wants is not scandal or crisis or betrayal. The frame she wants is the Republic itself, tested and surviving the test. She builds that frame in the first 3 minutes with the specific rhetorical precision of a woman who began practicing public address at 14 and has not stopped. Then she tells them, not everything. The complete account of Palpatine's operation will take months of investigation and years of trial to fully establish. What she gives the Senate today is the essential architecture, the dual identity, the manufactured crisis, the clone army's true purpose, the Sith conspiracy embedded at the Republic's center for over a decade. She gives it without inflection, without the performed emotion that lesser politicians use to carry weak arguments. The argument is not weak. It does not need carrying. She delivers it the way you deliver something that can stand on its own. The chamber's noise level changes as she speaks, not louder, more specific. The generalized tension of a room that knows something is wrong sharpens into the focused attention of a room that is now being told what is wrong and is processing it in real time. She can feel the change like a physical shift in the air. She finishes with the legal framework, the emergency provisions that exist specifically for this scenario, a chancellor found to be in violation of his constitutional role, the mechanisms the Republic built into itself against exactly this kind of failure, because the founders were not naive about power and what it does to the people who hold it for too long. She names the provisions by article. She names the interim governance structure they require. She names the individuals who, under those provisions, are constitutionally required to step into the roles they define. She sits down. The chamber is quiet for 4 seconds. In a room of 10,000 beings, 4 seconds of silence is an event. Then it is not quiet. Anakin is not in the Senate chamber. He is in a corridor on the 43rd floor of the Republic Executive Building, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall outside the room where Palpatine is being held, pending formal transfer to Republic detention. 2 temple guards are at the door, ceremonial in normal times. Functional today, their stun rifles set to a charge that is not ceremonial at all. The corridor is otherwise empty. He is sitting on the floor because there are no chairs, and because sitting on the floor was something he did a great deal of as a Padawan, when debriefs ran long and the anteroom furniture was insufficient, and Obi-Wan would find him there afterward, and raise an eyebrow and say nothing, because there was nothing in the Jedi Code that specifically addressed floor sitting. Obi-Wan comes down the corridor from the direction of the service access and stops when he sees him. He looks at Anakin for a moment. Then he sits down on the floor beside him with the practiced ease of a man who has done field service for 20 years and has long since made his peace with whatever surface is available. He stretches his legs out and says nothing for a while. The ventilation system moves through the walls. Somewhere below them, the city goes about its business. The council is in session, Obi-Wan says. Eventually, I know. They want to speak with you when it's over. I know that too. A pause. Mace's preliminary report has been circulated to all 12 members. The full account. Geonosis, the inhibitor chips, the shrine beneath the temple. Obi-Wan is quiet for a moment. The shrine has been confirmed. Master Plo ran the initial assessment this morning. It's there, exactly where you said it was. Anakin says nothing. Annie. Obi-Wan uses the name deliberately. The childhood name, the one that belongs to the person underneath the rank, and the ability and everything that has happened in the last 3 weeks. I need to ask you something and I need you to give me a real answer. All right. Who are you? The question is simple. It contains everything. Anakin looks at the opposite wall. The corridor is standard Republic construction, functional stone, service conduits running along the upper edge, lighting strips at floor level that cast everything in a flat practical light that is neither warm nor cold. He has looked at walls like this in 1,000 facilities on 100 planets. He has given orders from corridors like this, received reports, walked through them on the way to things he cannot undo. I am Anakin Skywalker, he says. I am also someone who has lived an entire life beyond this one, in a future that happened and then didn't happen. I don't know what the word is for that. I don't think there is one. Obi-Wan is quiet, absorbing this. The things you did, Obi-Wan says carefully, in that future, the things you've referenced without ever describing directly. They were very bad, Anakin says. The worst things. The kind that don't have a number because counting would require admitting the full sum. He pauses. I'm not going to describe them. Not because I'm protecting myself from it. I don't get to be protected from it. I carry it completely. I will always carry it. But because describing them to you would put something in you that you don't need to carry. And you've carried enough on my behalf. Obi-Wan sits with this for a long moment. The floor, the corridor, the guards at the end of it. Did I fail you? He says. Quiet, direct, the question of a man who has been holding it since Varakino and has chosen this moment to set it down. Anakin turns to look at him, his former master, his brother, the man he left burning on a volcanic shore in a timeline that will not now exist. 40 years old and tired in the specific way of someone who has been holding something carefully for a very long time and is asking, with this question, whether he can put it down. You did everything right, Anakin says. What happened was not a failure of your teaching, or your judgment, or your love. What happened was that I made choices. My choices in full knowledge of what I was choosing. The responsibility is mine. A pause. But I'm here now, and it didn't happen, and you don't have to carry the version where it did. Obi-Wan nods once. The movement is small and controlled, and contains considerably more than its size suggests. They sit in the corridor together for a while longer, without speaking. The council session ends in the early afternoon. Anakin stands before the 12 masters in the chamber where he has stood 100 times, in this life and the other, and he answers every question they ask him with the same directness he has been applying to everything since Varakino. No hedging, no managed disclosure, the truth, as completely as the question requires it. The inhibitor chips, confirmed through Shakti's emergency assessment on Kamino, completed this morning via holocom with the Kaminoan facilities, the chips identified in every clone in active deployment. A council team is already coordinating the logistical operation required to address them. It will take months. It will be done. The Sith Shrine, confirmed, assessment ongoing, full cleansing pending. Dooku, in transit to Coruscant, under Obi-Wan's supervision, the formal Geonosian stand-down document filed with the Senate Legal Office, the Confederacy in emergency session on 3 systems simultaneously, as its leadership attempts to understand what has happened to its architect. Palpatine, in Republic detention, his formal trial preparation beginning under the emergency constitutional provisions Padmé named on the Senate floor. The dark side in Anakin, present. He tells them this without invitation, because they will sense it if they have not already, and he will not be the thing that surprises them. He tells them the dark side has been a resident of his Force signature for long enough that he does not expect it to leave. He tells them he manages it, that the management is active and ongoing, and requires vigilance, and that the vigilance is something he intends to maintain. He tells them he will not pretend to be something he is not, in order to remain in their good standing. Plo Koon asks if he considers himself a Jedi. He considers the question honestly. I consider myself someone who has chosen the right thing. Whether that fits your definition of a Jedi is for the Council to determine. I won't contest the determination. The Council deliberates, not in his presence. He waits in the anteroom, in a chair this time, for 40 minutes. When Mace opens the door, his expression is the calibrated neutrality of a man who has arrived at a position through argument, and is still making his peace with it. The Council thanks you, Mace says, for everything, for Geonosis, for Palpatine, for the intelligence that prevented what would have been. He pauses. We are unable to grant you the rank of Jedi Knight at this time. The techniques you have used, the dark side methods, I know, Anakin says. However, Mace looks at him steadily. We are not in the business of discarding what saved us. You will remain in an advisory capacity, without rank, without the restrictions of rank. You will be consulted on matters relating to the Sith, to the dark side, to anything else within your specific knowledge. You will not be supervised or directed. You will answer to no one's authority but your own conscience. Anakin looks at him. That sounds like being a civilian. It is being a civilian, Mace says. A civilian the Order owes a debt to. A pause. Yoda would like a word before you go. The old master is in the garden. The temple's inner garden is one of the places Anakin knows best in the galaxy. A courtyard open to the sky, planted with the specific native Coruscant vegetation that survives at this altitude, maintained by the temple's youngest initiates as their first lesson in the care of living things. He spent hours here as a Padawan, as a knight, as the person he used to be. Yoda sits on the low stone bench at the garden's center. He looks smaller here than in the council chamber, or perhaps the same size, and the council chamber makes everything appear to require scale. Anakin sits beside him. The garden is quiet. Wind at this height and the sounds of the city far below, and the living things around them making their small, patient sounds. Saved us, Yoda says. Not a question. A statement offered back, simply. Maybe, Anakin says. I stopped one version. There may be others. Always in motion, the future is. Yoda turns to look at him. His ancient eyes hold the specific quality they have always held. The look of a being that has seen 900 years of the galaxy's capacity for both catastrophe and grace, and has reached an accommodation with both. The dark side. Still in you. Yes. Chosen it, you did not. Today, no, today I chose the other thing. Yoda is quiet for a moment. Every day, a choice. This you know. The garden breathes around them. Something small moves in the vegetation to their left. One of the initiate's maintenance creatures, a small blind burrowing animal that the gardening curriculum has adopted as a lesson in responsible care. It goes about its business in the roots without concern for what is happening in the world above it. Go home, Yoda says finally. Naboo, your mother, the senator. A pause, the weight of a smile in his voice, though his expression does not change. Live. This also matters. This also is the Force. Anakin looks at the garden for a moment, the sky above the open courtyard, gray and enormous, and running toward the horizon in every direction. The city far below, the living things around him, all of it real, all of it present. I know, he says. He inclines his head to the ancient master, who inclines his own in return. He walks out of the garden, through the temple's stone corridors, out through the main entrance into the Coruscant afternoon, and does not look back. Not from indifference, from a choice about where his eyes go now. Forward. Home. The things that are still alive. The gondola moves without hurry. That is the first thing he notices, coming back to Varakino after everything. The pace of the water. The gondola speeder's engine runs at its lowest setting, the way the boatmen here have always run it, because the lake country does not reward urgency, and the people who live alongside it have understood this for generations. The waterway is narrow here, threading between ancient volcanic rock formations that rise on both sides and catch the late afternoon light at angles that turn them briefly gold before releasing it. Flowering vines trail from the upper ledges. The water beneath the hull is the deep blue-gray of something very old and very cold, and entirely indifferent to the things that have happened above it in the last 3 weeks. Padmé sits beside him in the gondola. Her shoulder is against his. She has been asleep for the last 20 minutes of the journey, her head tipped slightly to the side. Her diplomatic composure finally and completely surrendered to the specific exhaustion of a person who has addressed the full Senate, coordinated 6 allied senators, filed 3 emergency constitutional provisions, given 4 separate recorded depositions, and has not slept properly since Tatooine. Her breathing is even. Her hands are in her lap. He does not move. He lets her sleep. He watches the waterway open up ahead of them into the lake itself. The full breadth of it, glacier-fed and enormous, the far shore a dark line of rock and vegetation barely visible in the afternoon haze. The villa appears around the final curve of the approach channel, white stone running with vines, its archways open to the air the way they have always been open, the lake visible through every room. He looks at it for a long moment. 3 weeks ago he stood in a doorway of that building and looked back at it from the outside, memorizing it. telling himself he would return. He is returning. The fact of it is simple and complete, and requires nothing added to it. The gondola nudges the landing dock. He secures it. He lets Padmé wake in her own time, which takes about 30 seconds. She surfaces from sleep the way she does everything, with immediate orientation, no transitional confusion, her eyes opening and finding the villa and the lake, and then him. "We're home," she says. "We're home," he says. The villa has been maintained in their absence by the Nabari family's household staff. 2 people, quiet and efficient, who have managed Varakino for years, and treat the place with the specific affection of caretakers who have never been made to feel like servants. They have left food in the kitchen and fresh water in the rooms, and otherwise made themselves absent, which is exactly right. Anakin walks through the villa alone, while Padmé sleeps properly, in a bed. For the first time since this began, he goes through each room without purpose beyond the going. The kitchen, where the cold tea sat on the table the night he left. The corridor, where R2 beeped awake in the dark. The room where he woke up with both hands and no machine breathing for him, and the lake outside the window, and the entire shape of his life altered irrevocably in a single moment of consciousness. He stands in that room for a while. The bed is made, the window faces the lake, same as it always did, the water moving against the stone foundations, in that patient, unhurried way that has not changed, and will not change. He looks at the window and the lake and the evening light beginning its long settling across the water, and he does the thing he has not fully allowed himself to do in 3 weeks of forward motion and managed urgency. He stops. He breathes, his lungs, his own, working without assistance. He lets the weight of it arrive completely, all of it at once, the whole accumulated mass of what has happened, not the events, those he can inventory with precision, but the meaning beneath the events. His mother alive in a kitchen on Tatooine, holding his hand at the edge of a vaporator field in the morning heat. Obi-Wan sitting beside him on a corridor floor asking, "Who are you?" with the specific courage of a man willing to hear an answer that might break something. Padmé on a Senate floor, 9 minutes, the Republic's founding document quoted back to itself by a woman who has believed in it long enough to require it to live up to its own language. Yoda in a garden saying, "Go home," as if home were both destination and instruction, and the whole of what the Force required of him now. He sits down on the edge of the bed. The same bed, the beginning of it. He puts his face in his hands and allows himself briefly and completely to feel the full scope of what he was given, and what he almost lost, and what he chose instead. Not for long, just long enough. Then he lifts his face and breathes, and goes to find something to eat. He calms his mother in the morning. The connection takes a moment to establish. Tatooine's communication infrastructure is what it has always been, functional and unhurried. And then her face appears in the blue holographic light of the common room's projector, and she looks at him with the immediate, focused attention that she always gives him, and says simply, "You're all right. I'm all right. Both of you? Both of us?" She nods. Behind her he can see the kitchen of the Lars homestead, the hooks of dried herbs, the edge of the wood-burning stove, morning light through the ventilation shaft, the ordinary domestic fact of a home going about its morning. "Klieg wants to know if the rumors are true," she says, "about the Chancellor. Tell him yes." She nods again. A pause. "Ani, are you at peace?" The question is direct and simple, and deserves a direct and simple answer. He looks at his mother's face in the blue light, 43 years old and whole, asking him the thing that matters underneath everything else that has happened. "I'm getting there," he says. She smiles. It reaches her eyes completely. "Good," she says. "That's enough." The weeks that follow have a quality he has no prior experience of. He has experienced urgency. He has experienced fear, grief, rage, the specific sustained violence of war and its aftermath. He has experienced 20 years of the particular deadness that comes from having surrendered the self entirely to someone else's purpose. He has not experienced this, the ordinary forward movement of days that belong to him, containing nothing that requires him to be other than what he is. He fixes things. The villa's water system is old and requires attention. He works on it methodically over 3 days. The repairs requiring the same quality of hands-on problem-solving that the Lars vaporators required, and producing the same specific satisfaction. He tends the lake garden, which has become overgrown at the edges nearest the water, the Naboo vegetation running to lushness in the humid air. He learns what grows here and what it requires, and he gives it what it requires because the giving is simple and the results are visible. Padmé works. She is always working. The Senate sessions via holocom when the chamber is in session. The Reform Committee she has joined at Bail Organa's invitation. The depositions and briefings that the Palpatine investigation requires of her as a primary witness. She works at a desk in the villa's main room in the mornings, and stops in the afternoons, and they eat dinner on the lake terrace every evening that the weather allows. He tells her about Luke and Leia on one of those evenings. He has been holding it, not from secrecy, from the sense that it required the right moment, a moment with enough stillness around it to receive what it is. He tells her they exist, in the original timeline, and that they were extraordinary. He tells her about Luke on the Death Star, holding out his hand. He tells her about Leia, who he did not know was his daughter, in that life, who carried everything without knowing she was carrying it, who led a rebellion against an empire built from her own parents' destruction, with a composure and a fury that he now understands she got from her mother. Padmé listens to all of this in the still evening air over the lake. They sound real, she says. Past tense and everything, they sound real. They don't entirely go away. She is quiet for a moment. The lake moves against the terrace foundation. The fireflies drift above the water in their slow, patient clusters. I'd like to meet them, she says. The versions that get to exist in this one. He looks at her. The specific look of a man allowing himself to have something he was certain would be taken from him. Yes, he says. I'd like that too. Shmi arrives in the middle of Naboo's long summer. Her ship sets down in the meadow above the villa on a morning so clear that the far shore of the lake is visible in detail for the first time in weeks, the volcanic rock and the dark vegetation sharp against the pale sky. Anakin meets her at the top of the path. She comes down the ramp with a single traveling case and looks at the lake and the villa and the flowering vines on the white stone, and breathes in the air, damp and alive and rich with growing things. Nothing like Tatooine's mineral dryness, and says, "Oh, I know," he says. She stays for a month. She and Padmé cook together in the villa's kitchen, which was designed by someone who valued the room's view over its function, and is consequently difficult to operate efficiently. They manage through collective determination and a great deal of improvisation. Shmi teaches Padmé to make Tatooine flatbread in an oven that is entirely the wrong temperature and requires adjustment every 4 minutes. They burn the first 3, get the 4th approximately right, eat it anyway standing at the counter, and agree that approximately right is sufficient. Padmé teaches Shmi the waterway navigation, which requires a facility with the gondola speeder's steering system that neither of them fully develops. They end up in the wrong channel twice, and correct course both times, and the second time, Shmi laughs until she has to hold the side of the boat. He watches this from the terrace and feels something he has no precise name for. Not happiness exactly. Happiness is too simple a word for something this compound. Something that contains happiness and something older, the specific warmth of a person who has seen the alternative and knows, with full knowledge, what this cost and what it is worth. On one of the last evenings before Shmi leaves, she and Anakin sit on the lake terrace after Padmé has gone inside. The sky is doing what Naboo skies do in the summer evenings. Moving through a sequence of colors that has no equivalent on Tatooine, the light coming off the water in long gold ribbons that shorten as the sun drops, and then go rose, and then go blue. They talk about small things. The garden, Owen's last message, 2 sentences reporting that the homestead's north vaporator array has been upgraded and that Beru is expecting their first child in the autumn. Kleeg's health, which is good. The Tuscan boundary, which has held. Then Shmi asks, "Are you at peace?" The 3rd time she has asked it, across different mornings and different places, and each time the answer has been a degree closer to complete. He looks at the lake. The moonlight on still water, the same water that was the first thing he saw when he woke up in this body with this second life and the whole impossible weight of what had to be done before him. He looks at his hands, both of them, both flesh, both his. He looks at the villa's lit windows where Padmé's profile moves against the glass, the sound of her inside, moving about in the warm room. "I am now," he says. Shmi leans her head against his shoulder. The gesture is simple and specific, the lean of a woman who has done this since her son was small and the nights were cold, and the future had not yet happened. He lets her. He puts his arm around her, and they sit together on the terrace while the light goes out of the sky over Lake Varikino. He does not look away from it. In the galaxy beyond the lake, things take the shape that things take when the worst is prevented, rather than survived. The clone army is stood down over 6 months. Tens of thousands of men who were built for a war that did not come are given instead the harder and quieter task of building lives in the absence of the purpose they were grown for. Some struggle, some find their way to something that is not the life they were designed for, and is nonetheless. Captain Rex settles on a farming world in the Mid-Rim and sends Anakin a message on the first anniversary of the arrests that is 4 sentences long and contains no sentiment and all of it. The separatist movement fractures, and then, slowly, imperfectly, in the way that political processes are always slow and imperfect, begins the work of being heard rather than seceding. The Republic is forced to address what it would prefer to manage, and the addressing is painful and incomplete and real. Leia Organa chairs the Reform Commission. Padmé serves on it. The work takes years. Most work that matters does. The Jedi Order looks at itself, which is the hardest thing any institution can be required to do. Some masters leave rather than change. Some young knights build something new inside the old structure, informed by what almost happened and what was chosen instead. The attachment doctrine is revisited with the seriousness it deserves. The shrine beneath the temple is cleansed over 4 months by a team of 6 masters working in rotation. When it is finished, Yoda reports that he can see clearly through the Force for the first time in decades, and the word he uses is not relief, but rather something in his own language that the translation renders as restored, which is not the same thing but is perhaps more accurate. Count Dooku is tried and convicted. He writes, in his supervised detention on Sereno, a book that is not an apology. He does not apologize and does not pretend to. But that is a thorough and brilliant and unflinching account of both the Sith and the Jedi as institutions, their failures, their mechanisms of self-deception, the way that righteousness in sufficient concentration becomes its own kind of blindness. It becomes required reading in Coruscant's political academies within a generation. He dies at 91 with his books around him, and a composure that people who knew him recognize as his version of peace. Palpatine is convicted on 23 counts. He is sentenced to permanent supervised detention on Coruscant. He does not speak publicly again. He writes nothing. He sits in a room with his books and his window and the Force that he can no longer use as a weapon, and he waits for time to finish with him, which it eventually does, without drama, as it finishes with everything. Very Kino. Sunset. The water is gold and still. Anakin Skywalker sits on the terrace. He is not Darth Vader. He is not the Emperor's instrument or the Jedi's weapon, or the chosen one pressed into the shape that other people's prophecies required of him. He is the person he chose to be, which is the only version of a person that is entirely real. His mother is on one side, his wife is on the other. The light goes out of the sky over Lake Varikino, in its long, unhurried way, and he watches it without looking away. Somewhere in the Force, in the space that is neither past nor future, where the things that were loved do not entirely leave, something very old and very tired dissolves into the evening light, not with anguish, not with the long mechanical exhale of a dying suit, with something that has no name in any language, but that the body knows when it feels it, relief and rest, and the knowledge that it was enough. The story is over. The life has just begun. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.